Chapter 563. It was around 9:20 in the evening in Xia City. 5 minutes after the second half of Luo Nan's class began, the video from the circular conference room had already entered the field of vision of practically every relevant person and group through all sorts of channels. It was like a rising tide overflowing a desolate beach. There was no place that could be spared. And on a certain luxurious cruise ship in the seas outside of Xia City, the program, Mutual Observation, practically burned money to discuss cooperation with Zhang Ji's behind-the-scenes team and the broadcasting platform. They began broadcasting at lightning speed. Their gimmick was undoubtedly the veteran extraordinary, Ghost Eye, Che Yi's evaluation and judgment of the subversive speech of the genius of Xia City, Luo Nan. This sort of attention-grabbing program was of an extremely professional standard. It was simply a perfect combination of business and style. However, there were always some surprises in everything. As the main character of the talk show, Ghost Eye, that old pervert, was actually able to probe his own bottom line once more. He was clearly a professional, but he just had to compete with dirty jokes. He practically turned a blind eye to the cage theory of the first half of the program after the break started broadcasting. Instead, the beautiful host's face and ears were flushed and she was drenched in fragrant sweat. The behind-the-scenes director had already forced himself to remind Ghost Eye many times, but Ghost Eye just ignored him. And when the second half of the program officially began, Ghost Eye didn't have any intention of restraining himself. Dan Yi read the question transmitted by the behind-the-scenes personnel. The expression of the sea of the mind should belong to the category of classical theory. Do you think Luo Nan's current speech is an interpretation from a new angle, or is it a return to a conservative consciousness? It doesn't matter if it's open or conservative. As long as the person is beautiful. Yes, it's fine as long as the theory is beautiful. Dan Yi secretly ground her teeth. She tried to probe deeper. Then you think that Luo Nan's current theory is beautiful? This phrase is quite good to use to describe you. Why do you need to separate it? The people in front of the stage and behind the scenes were about to go crazy. Ghost Eye's attitude could perhaps give the editor of the website some inspiration. They could concoct an eye-catching article, Frivolous versus Frivolous. Ghost Eye teaches the squirt can man how to attract attention. But it was simply a disaster for the program. The director and producer couldn't do anything to Ghost Eye, so in the end, they could only vent their anger on the host. Through the earpiece, they roared at Dan Yi, who had big breasts, a slender waist, and long legs but lacked the skills to control the situation. Originally, Dan Yi was about to go crazy because of Ghost Eye. Now that she was reprimanded by the people behind the scenes, her temper flared up, and she forgot that this was a live broadcast. She also forgot that the old man in front of her was one of the scariest people in the world. With a dark expression, she tore off her headset. Just as she was about to smash the tablet in her hand suddenly felt light. The tablet that was about to shatter fell into Ghost Eye's hand as if by magic. A person's impulse was always instantaneous, and then it would enter the period of regret. When Dan Yi's rationality that was destroyed by her violent emotions returned, she saw Ghost Eye's smile that was not a smile. Only then did she realize what kind of stupid thing she had done. Sir Che, Senior Gue Yen, Dan Yi subconsciously stood up, wanting to ask for forgiveness. But the next moment, she saw the producer, director, and other behind-the-scenes staff also rush out with pale faces, apologizing desperately. This time, the originally somewhat indistinct feeling instantly transformed into concrete fear. It crushed her in an instant, and her slender legs became as soft as noodles. She swayed on the verge of collapse. The behind-the-scenes staff made the worst mistake of all at this time. They didn't even interrupt the live broadcast signal, allowing the chaotic scene to spread along with the live broadcast signal to the entire world in an instant. And it just so happened that Luo Nan's speech over at the circular conference room was like a footnote for this abrupt and chaotic scene. On the mental plane, each and every one of us are constantly influenced by the outside world, and we are constantly influencing the outside world. We live in a crowded turbid flow of emotions. Countless corresponding force fields overlap and superimpose on each other. In an ideal state, our domain is a complete circle. But in reality, no one knows what sort of strange appearance it has. Basically, the higher a person's level is, the stronger the influence of their radiation will be. The range will be wider, and they will be able to preserve themselves more fully. Therefore, ability users are like whirlpools in the sea of the mind. They possess effective interference power. Within this sea, the strong will naturally interfere with the weak, whether they do it intentionally or not. Ghost Eye turned his head to look at the live broadcast screen. He turned and revealed a smile to the group of program crew members who were about to collapse. Does your program have an insurance clause? Who will be responsible if an accident happens and you get injured? Dan E expressed that she was under great pressure. Beads of tears rolled down her cheeks, and she was unable to speak at all. Whether it was the producer, the director, or the director, they practically believed that this was the prelude to a massacre. Not a single person could be found who could stand firm, let alone respond. Ghost Eye lost interest when he saw that the situation had developed to this point. He waved his hand, no longer teasing these juniors who couldn't take the fright. I'm just asking myself a few questions. Forget it. I'm more confident in the professional level of your legal department. Mr. Che, then. Continue. Don't cry anymore, Miss Dan. You're making my heart ache. Ghost Eye chuckled as he gently caressed Dan Yi's back. He half pulled her into his embrace. He didn't seem to have the airs of an extraordinary. Instead, he looked like a salty guy who took advantage of the situation. It was impossible to tell that he was the main culprit who nearly caused the entire program crew to piss themselves. He even bypassed the host and propped up the program by himself. There was a bit of an accident just now. I hope everyone doesn't mind. Everyone, please focus your attention on the class. Look at our Professor Luo. How appropriate. The physiognomy program also had an interactive platform. The platform had been bombarded with messages when the live broadcast incident occurred. Looking at it now, one could see a large pile of horrified expressions. I pissed myself. I thought I was going to send a wreath to the program crew. Sister Baijiu, hurry up and save me. Master Ghost Eye, calm down. Don't get the sequence wrong. I'm a step too late. The chaotic messages were of no significance to Ghost Eye. He swept through them in a straightforward manner, clearing the screen. He saw Luo Nan draw the corresponding diagram of turbid flow. He faced the live broadcast camera and chuckled. Actually, I'm quite interested in the cage theory. When a certain level is reached, ability users construct a domain based on their self-knowledge. This is especially true for the mental side's extraordinary domain. It's more or less the same train of thought. Does this mean he agrees? The idlers who wanted to watch the show but were unable to do so expressed shock one after another when they saw Ghost Eye express his opinion. After all, the subversive nature of the speech was one thing. Obtaining the approval of an extraordinary would produce a qualitative change. Did I agree? Frankly speaking, I don't know either. Ghost Eye's one-man show was quite outstanding, but he still remembered the pitiful Dan E beside him. He turned his head and asked, "What senses do you use in the mental world?" Dan E was a bit out of breath from crying. She was still a bit muddle-headed right now. She answered subconsciously, "I'm not of the mental side. I use soul strength." She thought that Ghost Eye's question would be very high level, but halfway through, she realized that it was completely basic common sense. Dan E was so embarrassed that her face turned red when she changed her answer midway. Ghost Eye didn't mind. He continued, "That's right. Soul strength is the senses of the mental world. There is no external source of light in the mental world. If you want to clairvoyance with others, you must first release light. The further you look, the more intense the light becomes. What you see then is the complete mental world, right? What you see is only the area covered by the light. In reality, no matter how bright your headlights are, you won't be able to move the pavement, the rocks, or the buildings. But in the mental world, your light is like a gale or a whirlpool. Everything is blown away. Everything is distorted. What you see is forever the result of the distortion. There is nothing else. He spread his hands. What can I agree to under these circumstances? What can I deny? Danny finally controlled her emotions at this time. At the same time, her attention was attracted by Ghost Eye's explanation. She asked subconsciously, is it the same even in the Abyss region's polar domain? Ghost Eye laughed involuntarily. When you reach the Abyss region's polar domain, you don't even have enough time to be disoriented. What do you want? To put it bluntly, the mental world is too sensitive and too chaotic. It's absolutely not a good object of observation. To be able to say that one is able to clearly see the mental world, one is either a swindler or an almighty. Dan-E really got into the zone under Ghost Eye's guidance. She followed up with a question, then do you think Luo Nan is a swindler or an almighty? Hee hee. Oh right. This is Luo Nan's information, right? Ghost Eye reverted to his old ways without any warning. He avoided Dan Yi's questioning and played a slippery trick. Next, he flipped through Luo Nan's relevant information in front of tens of thousands of spectators. Halfway through, Luo Nan had already finished drawing an ocean of blurred colors on the other side of the circular conference room. He indicated that this was the direct visual reflection of the mental world that he saw. Ability users have a clear advantage in the sea of the mental world, but we shouldn't overestimate it. In fact, there's no need for special powers. Revealing pictures of the opposite sex is enough to influence everyone's instinctive reactions. Another wave of laughter rang out within the conference room. Practically none of the 1,000 spectators present knew of the live broadcast incident in the open sea. They had already unwittingly fallen into the context that Luo Nan had woven. They were completely engrossed, their minds devoid of distractions. Luo Nan split a strand of his mind from beginning to end to pay attention to the scene on the mental plane within the conference room area. He was quite satisfied with the current situation. He maintained this rhythm and continued, this sort of neural reflex is closely related to primal instincts. It can also be considered a type of conscious activity. It's the level closest to the material plane, the shallow zone. Someone below the stage combined this with universal theory. But Luo Nan shook his head. Everyone, there's no need to classify a complex environment into layers. I'm more used to calling it turbid flow, taking its meaning of turbidity and chaos. Its interaction is very powerful, especially in the current information age. As long as there's a signal, a beautiful streamer can tug at your heartstrings from a distance of 10,000 kilometers. The virtual game designed by the toe-scratching burly man can create an environment of radio waves and light. It can also make you addicted. The lower limit of the mental plane is extremely low. The lower the limit, the easier it is to be affected. It's constantly being attacked and shaken, but our life force also comes from within. It's impossible to completely break away from it. We wish to effectively control our power. For this reason, we enter the plane of reason. We use reason to control it. However, rational thought that is established on a material foundation is far too precise. When it collides with the needs of the flesh at the bottom, reason will always be the loser. Pure desire and pure reason won't work. So we combine them together. There's a name for it here. It's called imagination. We can gather the most information and energy by reasonably utilizing imagination. In reality, we need to use all of our resources in order to form an extraordinary power. We need to prop up a domain bubble that can burst at any time. This domain isn't easy to come by, but our foundation is fundamentally shaky. All of the mental activities that are established on this foundation are shaky as well. What do we need to do under these circumstances? The mentally retarded question was practically laid out in front of them. The audience was happy to answer it. Stabilize. Hold on. We need to stabilize it. Though they were all talking at the same time, their opinions were always unified. Luo Nan nodded. That's right. We need to make up for what we lack. We need stability. We need to hold on for as long as possible. Only in this way can we eliminate the problems that we bring to our bones. Of course, even though I haven't been in contact with the inner world for a long time, I've received pointers from my teacher during my time studying Chuan Wu. I know that every school of thought and every person has similar methods of doing things. Consciously and unconsciously, I've already carried out this sort of stabilizing work. Speaking further, Buddhism has the precepts of tranquility and wisdom. Taoism has the mindfulness of meditation and forgetfulness. Confucianism has the knowledge, calmness, tranquility, and contemplation. There are also all sorts of traditional meditation methods and religious rituals. No matter which one it is, concentration and entering a meditative state are all extremely important links. These links are all for the sake of counteracting the root of the problem, reducing the effects of instability. Modern research has also shown that concentration can increase the precision of the operation of the consciousness. It can expand the scale and form a high-speed reaction to specific objects. Some researchers even say that the consciousness is nothing more than an instantaneous photograph of the surrounding environment. It's close to a movie. It's a series of still frames stitched together. Each frame is only a few dozen to a few hundred milliseconds. If we can increase the precision and scale, we can always maintain a reaction speed of 10 milliseconds. Then we will form an enormous, even essential difference from others who can only form images in 1 or 200 milliseconds. Your perception and reaction speed will be 10 times faster than others. Correspondingly, the operation speed of this world will be 10 times slower. Your control over the world will be super strong, and your operation will be super easy. Luo Nan was able to catch his breath with great difficulty after saying such a long string of words. He laughed a bit embarrassedly. I know that these are all clichés, but I'm just using this to emphasize the importance of the element of stability, as well as the efforts we've made before, both consciously and unconsciously. For the next short period of time, our topic is to try a new method on the basis of traditional methods. We will use our extraordinary powers to allow our own domain to maintain an effective, stable, and controllable structure. We will allow internal and external energy and information to flow. We will do our best to resist the interference of the overly crowded mental environment. Yes, this is the method of configuration. Simply put, it is to use configuration to cultivate. Just like what worker Zhai did before. Luo Nan roughly cleaned up the work area. Whether it was assistant number 1 or the model of the condensation ring he had drawn earlier, he put them all into the recycle bin. As he did these things, he said, using configuration to cultivate, I recommend that you study the structure of the Tower of Babel for the fleshly side. As for the mental side, the condensation ring we'll be talking about today should be the best choice for now. But no matter which one you choose, stability. Remember, stability is the goal you must pursue. Next, we might as well do an autopsy. We'll get down to the details and try to analyze the structure of the Tower of Babel and the condensation ring. Which structures are designed for stability? And which ones extend out from within? What direction should we focus on in actual cultivation? On a cruise ship in the open seas of Xia City, in the work area of the program, looking at faces, Dan Yi sniffed a bit. She gradually entered the right track under the guidance of the director. It looks like this genius of Xia City is going to enter more substantial content from discourse. We are looking forward to it. A friend on the interactive platform just now said, Senior Ghost Eye and Luo Nan seem to be singing the same tune. Is Luo Nan's opinion really in line with your intentions? Ghost Eye was still flipping through the materials evaluating Luo Nan. He responded lazily, everyone has their own preferences. While I approve of it, there will certainly be extraordinaries who oppose it. And it's not just one. I just said that the mental world is too turbid. The results of everyone's clairvoyance will be different. There's a huge difference. Dani blinked her eyes and said, if every extraordinaire has a different view, then where did the basic theories that we currently accept come from? They come from arguing. Huh? Isn't discussion, exchange, and debate the same as arguing in the end? In the end, it all depends on whose voice is louder and whose fist is harder. You can use your principles to form extraordinary power to beat me into a pig's head, so I can only acknowledge you. You have similar ideals, and there are many people with many accomplishments. I'm just a single old man. I can't beat you, so I'll acknowledge you. If both sides are evenly matched, and no one can convince the other, then we'll compromise. It's that simple. Dan E wasn't the only one who was a bit stupefied. All the ability users watching the program, looking at faces, had their brains go a bit numb when they heard this answer. Then should Mr. Luo's theory also be? Ghost Eye laughed loudly. It's a bit early to talk about this. Everyone knows who's protecting Xia City right now. Professor Luo's lectures are inspired by someone. If they protect him. Oh, then again, what do Ouyang and the martial monarch think? There's also a bunch of guys joining in on the fun. This is quite worth guessing. Dan Yi's mind was filled with good fortune when she heard Ghost Eye say this. She had a flash of inspiration, and she opened her mouth to ask the most professional question of the day. It's not like we're arguing with everyone we see. You didn't lower yourself to our level just now. What sort of standards do we have to reach in order to be able to argue with each other? About this, Ghost Eye hesitated for a moment, but he didn't avoid it in the end. According to our Professor Luo's theory, we need to break through that cage no matter what. We need to be relatively free to enter and exit the function. According to the general theory, if someone uses this theory of his to enter the abyssal region, then they can basically enter the evaluation standard. Hee. It's still early. It's still early. There needs to be a fermentation process. Right at this time, Luo Nan was holding an electronic pen in the circular conference room. He was about to drop it down. Right now, let's say we want to create a brand new configuration. We need to have a framework to choose from. Here, I recommend the condensation rings ring-shaped structure. It's simple, conforms to the habits of human psychology, and it gives us enough room to operate. He was just about to pick up the pen as he spoke, but he shook his head in the next second. Because this structure is a temporary design. It's just an experiment. I'm not sure if I can use light to realize interference on the mental plane. If everyone doesn't mind, I'll just use my soul strength to sketch it out. Quite a few people in the conference room thought of the word violation, but they didn't care about the answer that was about to be announced. They immediately agreed one after another. However, the 30,000 viewers of the live broadcast weren't happy. Not to mention the value of this demonstration, Luo Nan's sketch on the mental plane wasn't even giving them any attention. They also wanted to be violated. No, they wanted to be able to see it with their own eyes. Zhang Ji was the host, so she naturally became the representative. She stood up and raised her hand. For the sake of over 30,000 comrades, Mr. Luo, can you still use the previous method? These words actually carried a bit of hidden sarcasm. The audience in the conference room immediately became vexed. Our Xia City's internal training is a bit too broad. This is supposed to be a secret technique. Do you really want to make it known to the entire world? Didn't you say Xia Puff? Didn't you say spray pot guy? Why did you remember it now? What's wrong with you? The circular conference room became very noisy. Luo Nan muttered to himself for a moment and laughed. I still have more confidence in outlining with my soul strength. But I can try to interfere in the opposite direction. I just need to spend a bit more effort. He tossed the electronic pen down as he spoke, but the work area flickered with a red lustrous glow. It was a bit sluggish at first, but the pen quickly recovered to its original liveliness. This was the effect of soul strength, but soul strength was incorporeal. It didn't have any color to speak of. This was completely the result of Luo Nan forcefully interfering with the material plane with his soul strength. Low gasps of admiration rang throughout the conference room. Everyone present was an industry insider. They knew how difficult it was to do this. Using soul strength to interfere with light waves in the opposite direction was just a simple matter, but the nature of soul strength was different. There were many types of soul strength. Some people could use mental storms to kill people, but it was impossible for Luo Nan to teleport objects and pour himself a cup of water. Luo Nan was famous for his long-range senses. What people were most familiar with was the infrasonic wave array. Now he could interfere with light waves and affect the activity of photons. What kind of adjustment ability was this? What kind of aptitude and potential did he have? Papercut subconsciously rubbed his face. He looked at the current situation and thought back to a month ago. Everyone was still distressed over Luo Nan's paper-blowing interference power. They really suspected that they were in a dream. He spat out a turbid breath. His eyes strained, and his mind strained as well. He looked more carefully. Luo Nan swept his gaze below the stage. His smile was a bit subtle. Actually, he didn't have the ability to actually compete with photons. He relied on the powerful force field of the altar's frame to create a temporary distortion. Everyone present was actually helping him. And because of this, the strokes of soul strength carried a heavy blood color. It was as if they were drawn with a cinnabar brush, bright and eye-catching. This was the reflection of the life strength of several thousand ability users in Xia City. Chapter 564. Luo Nan stood on the lectern. His hands were motionless, and the blood-red ring had already outlined its overall shape. From the looks of it, it was already a little like a configuration. When it was placed next to the enlarged condensation ring that had been demonstrated previously, it didn't look much different at first glance. But Luo Nan understood more than anyone else that this was just a toy used for demonstration. Even the structure of the main body, which was temporarily stabilized on the mental plane, was at least 2 levels lower than the true configuration. According to Luo Nan's stumbling translation of the Virtual Brain System's user manual these past 2 days, a qualified configuration should represent the transcendence of the form and soul of life within the system. It should be stable and could be constructed. Just like the current ring. It basically belonged to the category of group consciousness. The mental worlds of over 1,000 people overlapped together. Under the influence of internal and external forces, it formed a special form that possessed extraordinary significance. It also possessed a certain function. But this wasn't a configuration. It was formed under the guidance and pressure of external forces. Its body wasn't stable, and its interior was rather chaotic. Once it disintegrated, it would be impossible to reassemble it in a purely structural sense. Luo Nan's stability was admittedly the #1 priority in order for it to become a configuration. But how to restore it to a reasonable functional structure was a key problem that needed to be solved. Luo Nan didn't mention these things. He spoke with confidence and composure on the stage. No one could tell that he had no experience in configuration design at all. Today's demonstration on the lectern was the first time in his life. Now we have the framework and the design ideas. What we need to do next is to refine the structure. The goal is very simple. We need to guarantee the stability of the configuration. We need to eliminate the interference of the internal and external turbid flows as much as possible. This is the only function, so there's no need to make it too complicated. We just need to rely on a simple basic structure to prop up this frame. We should pay attention here. We look like architects, but the mental plane and the material plane are different in the end. We can't substitute a material structure inside. What we need is an effective structure in the mental world. Bamboo Pole in the front row raised his hand once more. Is there a standard for this so-called effective structure? Luo Nan smiled at him. Do I look like someone who can set a standard for a configuration? Bamboo Pole also smiled. It's hard to say today. It's hard to say tomorrow. Luo Nan wasn't prepared to expand on the side issues. He shook his head. If I were to say it now, the so-called effective structure only needs to be able to realize the circulation and operation of extraordinary power. But I feel that instead of trying to figure out new structures that have no foundation, it's better to borrow the existing results for the time being. He made a gesture, and a table appeared in the work area behind him. On it was a series of separate structural comparisons. The participants who had gone through the first half of the course vaguely remembered that Luo Nan had mentioned this when he had analyzed the Tower of Babel. It was dismantled from above. This is a simple analysis I did with the help of the computational space during my break. The idea was very simple. It was to see how much of the basic structure dismantled from the Tower of Babel was meaningful to the condensation ring. As I said in the first half, if I was given some time, I might be able to use the idea of the Tower of Babel to put together a condensation ring. This analysis was a proof of feasibility. For this reason, I tried to disassemble the condensation ring, but I failed miserably. I won't show you the specific results for now. I'll show you when I have the chance. But then, I used this foundation to compare the basic structures dismantled from both sides. The results are quite interesting. Luo Nan circled the key points with his digital pen. The structure at the very top of the table was a pair of curved and wedge-shaped structures. Looking at them with the naked eye, they were about the same. The data behind them was 92.4%. It was labeled the coincidence rate. This pair of similar structures. The one on the left comes from the Tower of Babel. I talked about it in the first half of the course. The one on the right comes from the condensation ring. This is the result of my rough dismantling. Everyone can see that the coincidence rate between the two is very high. Though the conditions set up might be a bit simple, and the results are only for reference, I feel that there is only one point that proves the value of the connection between them. They both play the role of a stable framework in their respective configurations. This provides us with an excellent choice. Luo Nan's speech was extremely frank. It was tantamount to erasing all mysterious factors. He completely presented his design train of thought to the thousands of participants and the tens of thousands of spectators. So when he talked about this place, Deep Blue Base, Jeff directly contacted his subordinates from every division. He only had one request: immediately analyze the feasibility. Herman, who was in Luo City, shouted at his legal team, record it. Record it all. This is plagiarism. When the product hits the market, I'll make him go bankrupt. In the outer seas of Xia City, Dan E was gradually getting into a good mood within the program group face reading. She tried to obtain a clear evaluation. Does Mr. Che believe that it will succeed based on the current train of thought? Ghost Eye didn't give her the chance. Instead, he flipped through Luo Nan's information even more seriously. His mouth was still muttering sentences that no one could hear clearly. No matter how the spectators evaluated, Luo Nan's explanation and demonstration weren't affected in the slightest. He had already begun to make his move, on the podium right now. He drew a new outline next to the frame of the ring body he had drawn earlier. His mouth was also explaining, the condensation ring needs to pay attention to the condensation efficiency of water molecules. Its functions are more complex, so it only takes a few limited cycles to complete the entire structure. The optimization within is incomparable. But it doesn't matter if we drag things out a bit. Frankly speaking, we're just piecing together the basic structure over and over again. It's quite stupid, right? I think so too. Luo Nan drew very slowly and very carefully. He was more cautious than any of his previous operations. But in the eyes of the participants and spectators, this structure was much simpler and cruder than the condensation ring or the Tower of Babel. Frankly speaking, Roland had taken the curved wedge-shaped structure and made a slight mutation. He had stacked and arranged them together to form a complete ring body. Such a structure could be said to be concise and flat in a nicer way. To put it bluntly, it was like building blocks. Even a 3-year-old child playing with Lego would feel that this train of thought was far too low. The conference room was quite quiet at first, but after this detailed diagram structure was repeated 2 or 3 times, a buzzing sound gradually began to rise. Octopus, who was in the front row, twisted his head. He turned around and covered his mouth. He whispered, "This isn't good. Why do I feel like the atmosphere is about to collapse?" Bamboo Pole didn't reply. Papercut asked him, "Have you verified it yet?" "I've verified it, and I've completed it. It's not difficult, but I can't see any results." Octopus was a member of the Xia City branch operation team. Even though he was famous for his drugs, his basic abilities were quite solid. It was easy for him to follow Luo Nan and walk through it. In fact, he completed it faster than Luo Nan. A total of 8 curved wedge-shaped structures were needed in order to complete the ring body. They were stacked upside down from top to bottom. They were divided into 4 groups of 2. The drawing method for each structure was the same. The stacking method within each group was the same. The connection method between each group was the same as well. And so on and so forth, cycling back and forth. In the end, a complete structure that wasn't complicated was formed. Luo Nan had purposefully slowed down for the sake of demonstrating and to take care of the majority of the non-awakened present. He had only drawn 3 groups up until now. He was at least 4 or 5 seconds away from completion. The awakened present, especially the mentally awakened, most of them didn't have this patience. They finished drawing early, but they couldn't see any results. It was hard to avoid being a bit impatient. This was most likely what Octopus heard from the discussion behind him. The inner world was like this. As long as you had concrete evidence, even if you spouted shit, people would still listen to you. But on the other hand, if you didn't have any results, then you would be slapped in the face no matter how extravagant your words were. Octopus didn't want to be slapped in the face. He was just worried, don't work hard all night and end up getting blown away by the wind and rain. That would be too vexing. In fact, there were already people on the internet who couldn't wait to jump out and announce the result, 3 seconds to complete, then. That's it. The legendary anticlimactic ending. I've finally seen it. Is there a follow-up? Who hasn't finished drawing yet? Are you sure he's not thinking about how to wrap things up? At this time, the nearly forgotten Re shrugged her shoulders in front of the camera. She suppressed the joy in her eyes and put on a calm expression, this kind of result from a completely uncreative patchwork. It's not a pleasant surprise, nor is it unexpected. The clamor outside the venue didn't matter to Luo Nan, but the buzzing noise inside the venue affected him. He finished his demonstration 5 seconds later and his brows furrowed, quiet. There are still people who haven't finished. This configuration is primarily prepared for the unawakened. If the awakened present have spare energy, you can try to increase the difficulty yourself. For example, he snapped his fingers, and a 3rd blood-colored ring appeared in the work area. The ability users watching the live broadcast didn't understand what was going on, but the buzzing noise in the venue had already changed. Octopus's eyes went wide. This speed. Hold on. How many sets? Papercut closed his eyes and observed from the mental plane, it seems like 16 sets. 32 sets. It's 4 times the number in an instant. There's this kind of operation. Luo Nan looked around the venue and said calmly, everyone can try again. Continue to stack the number. But you must pay attention. If you want this configuration to be meaningful, it must be tested so that its group, remember, group, will appear exponentially higher. The simplest is 4 sets. I just demonstrated 16 sets. Next will be 64 sets. Like this. Following a finger snap, Octopus cried out involuntarily, holy crap. A 4th blood-colored ring appeared in front of Luo Nan at this moment. It was meaningless to discern it with the naked eye, but many people could discern its internal structure on the mental plane. Chapter 565. After confirming everything inside and outside, the crowd was a little dumbfounded, and the audience was in an uproar. Really? It's doubled again. My condolences for your early death. This is the index, okay? Did you copy and paste it? Why don't you try making a copy? That means he's already storing up energy when he's talking. Well, how long do you need to complete a basic wedge-shaped module? It's 0. 4 seconds here. 1 seconds of newbie shivering. A piece of trash who doesn't care about the time to seek relief. Luo Nan didn't care what the audience inside and outside of the podium thought. He turned his head to look at the progress of the non-awakened on both sides of the podium. He reminded them, it doesn't matter if you're unable to finish quickly right now. You just need to practice more in the future. Oh, they're all done. No one understood how Luo Nan was able to confirm this, but they all saw it at this moment. The youth on the stage snapped his fingers once more, and a clear ringing sound accompanied the appearance of the fifth blood ring. At this moment, the thousands of aptitude users on the field felt as if their scalps, faces, and skin all over their bodies had been electrified. They felt numb all the way from their heads to the soles of their feet. There was no doubt that this was not a psychological effect, but a baptism of some kind of interference force from the outside. The venue was a little chaotic, because at this moment, they felt their hearts sink, as if they were being run over by a silent vibration at close range. They thought about Luo Nan's beautiful reputation as the humanoid infrasonic array. Don't blame them for pondering over it. Luo Nan raised his hand to pacify them. I won't force you guys to make this 256 groups and 512 pieces structure for now. Luo Nan's words were cut off by the clamorous waves of noise within the venue. Some people in the back row had already stood up and were looking forward. Some people in the front row craned their necks. Some people closed their eyes. They wanted to figure out if what Luo Nan said was true or not. It was impossible for the naked eye to make out such an exquisite structure. But if the configuration on the mental plane was not part of Luo Nan's invasive hallucination, then the answer was certain. Bamboo Pole subconsciously sat up straight and stared blankly at the podium for a while. Then, he rubbed his face hard to wake himself up. Even though he felt that he had always been calm, he was still suffocated by that person on the stage. It was probably because he got to know Luo Nan far too early. He was used to seeing Luo Nan's inexperienced appearance. He always treated Luo Nan as a young genius with enormous potential that had yet to be fully displayed. However, in the blink of an eye, the talent of a genius suddenly materialized. What was even more frightening was that he still couldn't see the bottom, nor could he see the edge. Can I change to formatting theory now? Octopus took out a medicine bottle from somewhere and rubbed it in his hand. It seemed that as long as someone agreed, he would immediately open a bottle of medicine and embark on a new journey. Stop fooling around. Luo Nan couldn't hear who had interrupted his delusion amidst his daze. But Luo Nan had already followed up with the previous words, I'm just using this structure to do a verification. Among your works just now, did any of them collapse? I know there must be. If it collapses, it means that I failed and I need to redo it. The entire audience, including everyone watching the live broadcast, had stupefied expressions. They didn't understand the logic behind Luo Nan's words at all. However, the inner world was like this. As long as you're awesome, even if I'm stupid and become an idiot, I'll accept it. Some people immediately lowered their heads to examine their own works. At the same time, they would steal glances at others to see if they could find someone who was suffering the same fate as them. Luo Nan continued, everyone, don't worry. Although the cage is very stubborn internally, it has long been oppressed in the sea of consciousness. Beads of water, bubbles, and unstable states are its normal state. The collapse of a configuration that is built on this foundation isn't scary at all. Actually, this structure is extremely simple. If you guys are extremely diligent in doing it, focused enough, and maintain the precision of the structure, then the most basic 4 sets shouldn't be difficult. As for the accumulation of exponential principles, C rank or B rank on the mental side can give it a try. I feel that completing 16 sets in 1 second shouldn't be a problem for AC rank. AB rank should be able to complete 64 sets in 1 second. It shouldn't be too difficult either. The truly challenging part is at the back, but that's just a matter of intensity. Someone said an old cliché in the live broadcast room at this time, I don't know if I should say MMP or not. The MMP in the live broadcast room exploded in an instant, interspersed with countless emojis covering their faces and crying bitterly. Luo Nan looked at his watch, I'll give everyone another 10 minutes of time. It won't be a problem as long as everyone is able to create the basic 4 sets of configuration in this environment. Luo Nan let out a breath in secret after he finished speaking. Admittedly, the inspiration and analysis of the Tower of Babel and the condensation ring came from the Tower of Babel. But frankly speaking, the final structural train of thought still came from the user manual of the virtual brain system. This method of infinite composition of the curved wedge structure was a small example from the user manual. It was used to introduce the configuration design and the corresponding design verification method. Before a configuration could be used as a dynamo core or a spirit core, it was necessary to go through the steps to see if every part of the structure conformed to the standard. It was feasible, so as to avoid damaging precious materials. Luo Nan didn't bite off more than he could chew. He didn't have any thoughts of pursuing perfection. He was a novice from head to toe when it came to configuration design. He could clearly distinguish the difference between imagination and delusion. Finding the curved wedge structure in the user manual that corresponded to reality was already a pleasant surprise. If he didn't copy a ready-made example and insisted on inventing and creating something, the 1,000-plus ability users of Xia City present wouldn't be able to withstand his calamity, even if he had the mind to do so. The class was nearing its end, and Luo Nan wanted to have a good ending. He seized the time to review the short introduction in the user manual once more. He wanted to see if he had missed anything and if there were areas that could be improved. But not even a minute passed before someone raised their hand. "Mr. Luo, isn't your teaching method a bit unfriendly to the fleshly side?" Luo Nan was stunned for a moment, then he immediately laughed. "I can introduce my teacher to the fleshly side's training method. As for right now." There were about 100 people in the conference room who were fleshly side. The vast majority of these people came to join in the fun. None of them had any hopes of actually getting any breakthroughs from the class. They mainly came to get familiar with each other. It could be considered a disguised social activity. But now that the group atmosphere had risen, it was hard for those who had nothing to do to avoid feeling a bit ostracized. Figuratively speaking, they were restless. In this kind of situation, once someone took the lead, the others couldn't help but show some enthusiasm and helplessness, right? 100 people could create quite a bit of noise. The conference room was a bit chaotic. In the end, even Xue Lei raised his hand to ask, "I feel that my power becomes congealed when it reaches the mental plane. It's very hard to reforge it. What should I do now?" Luo Nan had a bit of a headache when faced with his friend's earnest and inquisitive gaze. The mental state of these 100 fleshly side people actually met the standard. They were a part of the group consciousness. It would be too much of a pity to abandon them, and it wouldn't be beneficial to maintaining the overall state. However, the fleshly side and the mental side were good in different directions. This wasn't something that could be handled by a simple configuration. Within the virtual brain system, this was the domain of the dynamo core. Compared to the configuration, the dynamo core's direct function was simplification and practicality. The dynamo core could take an extremely complex configuration and preserve it in the form of a physical object. It would be convenient for later use, or for further research and improvement. Just like the current group mental structure of the conference room. Luo Nan needed to do something similar to what he did today in order to create this state next time. He needed to use subversive remarks and irrefutable facts to guide the minds of over 1,000 participants and influence the thoughts of several tens of thousands of ability users. Only then could the dynamo core take shape. Such conditions were already something that could be encountered but not sought. But if the current state could be transformed into a configuration, or if he took it a step further and made this configuration into a dynamo core, then he only needed to gather a group of people and pour their soul strength into it. The dynamo core of a burner was also like this. It could greatly reduce the difficulty of control and increase the degree of stability. But this was too far away. After all, transforming a configuration into a dynamo core involved a complex process of changing from me to not me. Not only did it require the corresponding equipment, it also required extremely high technical requirements for the operator. Luo Nan was temporarily unable to reach this level. He stood on the stage, feeling powerless for the first time. Yuan contacted him in private while he was in a daze. "Perhaps you can demonstrate it through the hexeer." Hexeer? The psychic wave network? Luo Nan was stunned for a few seconds. His train of thought suddenly opened up. Perhaps, it really is possible. President Ouyang and the others established the psychic wave network. In a certain sense, the psychic wave network transformed the different characteristics of every ability user into psychic waves that could be used for common communication. This already involved an extremely profound transformation problem. It was similar to the technology provided by the virtual brain system, especially at the level of the simulator. Luo Nan had seen the psychic wave network more than once that the fake could be passed off as the real. There were interference modules that could simply turn the fake into the real. If the psychic wave network was used as a medium, then the boundary between real and fake would be infinitely blurred. Luo Nan was greatly moved for a time. He asked, "Is it convenient? You can open a fixed port. I've done it before during the training demonstrations. The results are okay." How wonderful. Speaking of which, this was a benefit only members of the Xia City branch could enjoy. In any case, he could give it a try. Luo Nan snapped his fingers in great delight, scaring everyone inside and outside. They thought that the 1024 sets of super templates had come into being. Luo Nan wasn't greedy. He said, "How about this? Sister Yueyin has a very good suggestion. We can practice on the psychic wave network. Next, I'll set up a new template in the public space of the psychic wave network. All friends who have fleshly bodies can follow the template and practice. It should be effective. Others who find it difficult for the time being can also practice through this method." He saw through the thoughts of the attendees and immediately said, "Everyone, there's no need to care too much about the intensity. The one providing the intensity isn't you yourselves. Or perhaps it's better to say that it isn't only you yourselves." Luo Nan had already finished setting up the template of the public space amidst the muddled expressions of most people. He announced the number and allowed the ability users present to freely choose whether or not they wanted to practice. This small interlude didn't affect the overall atmosphere. The number of people talking in the venue grew fewer and fewer. The group consciousness grew more and more cohesive. While Luo Nan was setting up the public space, it was Gao Meng's turn to look at Ouyang Chen in the Psychic Wave Network Maintenance Center, 10 floors away from the circular conference room within the Shangding building. Chapter 566. At this moment, Gao Meng's atmosphere was rather foul. This was because he had taken out talismans and folded them over and over again during the previous lesson. After nearly 2 hours of lesson, he had already burnt 7 or 8 talismans. His whole body was filled with the smell of soot. Finally, he could not help but ask, "Ouyang, what do you think about the theoretical basis of the bloody ring?" "It's that cage theory." Ouyang Chen thought for a moment and said, "The description is very careful. It has always excluded the influence of the abyss region." "That's it? To be able to consider the influence of the abyss region on the 3 zones, is that not enough?" Looking at Gao Meng's disapproving expression, Ouyang Chen finally broke into laughter. "Alright, what I mean is, to be able to use a hypothesis to integrate the 3 belts phenomenon, whether it's correct or not, it's extremely valuable." Only then did Gao Meng turn from annoyance to joy. Right. I also feel that the more he does this, the more he understands the abyss region. He is much better than those dreamers who blindly guess from multiple dimensions. You see, I have experimented quite a few times. Following this path, many of the previous problems have been explained. The most amazing thing is that there is no outline for the time being. This is really amazing. Ouyang Chen nodded slightly. He stared at the projection interface and said in a low voice, "After all, there are still conditions. If he can go one step further." Gao Meng laughed, "You are too much. If he goes one step further, how can he be taught in the beginner class? Even now, I feel that it is a bit too much. Let him go to the advanced class later." "That is not a problem." Ouyang Chen replied very decisively and added, "I am considering whether to open a research project for him and organize a team first. It would be a pity if I don't investigate further." Research project? You want him to lead a team? While Gao Meng was in a daze, the staff had already reported the results to the two big shots. The bloody ring model has been established. Beginning conversion. Current conversion rate is 17.3%. Steadily increasing. Interference rate not shown. No interference rate. Gao Meng frowned. It is because it is a pure spiritual configuration. Ouyang Qin did not comment. Let's see. Gao Meng folded the yellow talisman in his hand. He was a little hesitant. In the psychic wave network system, the model conversion ratio and interference rate were two hard indicators. The former reflected the adaptability of the model module to the psychic wave network, and it was the standard to judge whether a developed product was suitable for the psychic wave network system. The latter had more practical significance. It represented the specific effect a model could have on the material plane through the psychic wave network. Under normal circumstances, the interference rate of the psychic wave network to the Xia city was around 2% to 3%. This was enough to ensure communication. During war, the interference rate would soar to 10%, powerful interference rate. During war, interference rate would rise to over 10%. If it was a larger-scale battle, especially a powerful conflict, the interference rate had to be above 20% to be safe. For instance, last time when the motorcycle gang was chasing after Luo Nan, the interference rate of the psychic wave network in the combat area was constantly approaching 25%. That was already the limit under normal circumstances. Ring. The interference rate would be Yang Luo more interference rate. The interference rate would time and would be the interference rate. The city would. The interference rate. Of course, Gao Meng didn't expect Luo Nan's blood will ring's interference rate to exceed 25%. He didn't even need it to exceed 10%. Gao Meng did not expect the interference rate of Luo Nan's blood intent ring to exceed 25%. He did not even need 10%. It was not a war anyway. However, the monitoring data seemed to be competing with him. The model conversion ratio was rising. It had already risen to 74%. It looked like there was no problem for it to reach the 90% standard. After all, the structure itself was quite simple. The problem lay in the interference rate. There was practically no reaction from start to end. Even if there was a slight fluctuation, it would be hard to call it stable. In this way, in a practical sense, Gao Meng felt a bit stifled. He tried to explain, the interference rate in the building is 5%. There will certainly be resistance. Also, are there many people in the venue who are not connected? Are they being diverted? What's the current number of connected models? 221 people. It's still rising. Many people are applying for seamless connections. But this will increase the load on the system. In theory, there is a risk of damaging the terminal. Do you agree? Without waiting for Ouyang Chen to give the order, Gao Meng clapped. Agree. Why wouldn't I agree? Looking at the interference rate, the possibility of damage is practically zero. Pooh. I mean, let go. Let go. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Ouyang Chen. Right now, it looks like this is a piled-up model. Quantity is very important. Gao Meng pondered whether or not he should get 256 groups of support and join in the fun. If that kid Luo Nan could do it, then Gao Meng shouldn't have any problems either. As for Ouyang Chen, Gao Meng couldn't let him stay idle. You can still go up a level, right? The 1 in 1024 is yours. Gao Meng was just about to open his mouth to invite Ouyang Chen when Ouyang Chen issued an order. Turn on the warning. Module 4. Probe the direction of the gully area signal. Gao Meng was startled. His expression immediately turned serious. Is someone here to cause trouble? Ouyang Chen shook his head. At this time, a staff member asked him for instructions. Turn on Module 4. Request direction instructions. Internal Block A1. Circular conference room. Luo Nan had already received feedback from the Psychic Wave Network Maintenance Center on the rostrum of the circular conference room. This included the serial number and code name his configuration obtained. Ring of Blood Intent. This name is barely acceptable. Luo Nan felt a bit unreasonable in his mind. This was because this name was different from the label on the user manual. It was more vivid, but it didn't touch on the essence. Right now, within the vast ocean of the mental world, thousands of water droplets and bubbles condensed into a circular form. A subtle transformation was happening. It became more textured and possessed more meaning from the perspective of structural science. Luo Nan's thoughts stirred slightly. This structure, which was full of textures and even the dazzling and blurred ocean of consciousness, suddenly lost all color. It transformed into a simple and even monotonous deep space of gloom. The turbid waters of the vast ocean retreated, and the dancing and floating curtains became the only elements in this space. Looking at it as a whole, the thousands of curtains were in a state of roughly regular parallelism. Layer after layer, from low to high, or from far to near, divided the deep space of gloom into countless layers. But in terms of details, a considerable portion of the curtains were warped and intertwined with each other to form nodes. Luo Nan was no stranger to this sort of situation. It was probably due to the influence of formatting theory's absolute observation. Most of the time, the mental plane in Luo Nan's eyes was this sort of deep multi-layered structure of curtains. It was far more complex than the universal theory of 3 layers, 1 area, and 1 domain. And it was precisely because of this that he had always lacked a sense of agreement with the universal theory. He felt no pressure when he rejected it. And now, he used the mysterious eye symbol to reconstruct his understanding. Then, he clairvoyantly observed the mental world, and the gorgeous and colorful elements fused into a furnace. Perhaps this was closer to the habits of ordinary ability users, but he could still switch at any time and return to his previous mode. Comparison was always the starting point for new discoveries. Right now, Luo Nan felt that the structure of the curtains he saw was more like a refinement and purification of the complete mental world. It was like simple mode, safe mode, and so on. Yes, it could be called developer mode. Under developer mode, Luo Nan was able to confirm that the curtains belonged to a certain key element of the mental world. Moreover, they were responsible for the construction of the frame. The logic world, gear, and the passageway leading to the cloud world were all powerful proofs. Luo Nan switched his observation mode, and the configuration of the ring of blood intent changed accordingly. It was a textured structural state in the dazzling sea of consciousness, but it was just a node in the deep and gloomy deep space. It was a simple interweaving of several curtains. The point of intersection was where the configuration was located. To be precise, there should be 3 curtains. One of them originated from the deep space. Another originated from the bottom. There was also a third strand that seemed to take form after the first 2 intersected. But soon, it was pulled and merged with the existing curtains in the void, creating a third pole. It also formed a very typical 3-dimensional position. Back then, Luo Nan had this feeling when he used the eye symbol to reconstruct his cognition. It was as if a classical rectangular coordinate system extended from his body. The 3 directions led to different dimensions. Then it continued to expand, endlessly becoming more and more refined. That's right. Luo Nan himself was a node. Compared to himself, the node structure of the ring of blood intent was far too simple. It was to the extent that he could already clearly distinguish the only details within. From what he could see, the structure of the curtains that originated from the deep space and the bottom began to permeate each other after they intersected. A few marvelous lines weaved back and forth on the nodes. They were just like the looms he saw in his history lessons. They weaved back and forth, warp and weft intersecting. Finally, simple or gorgeous cloth and satin were weaved. After the ring of blood intent was formed, it connected with the curtains of the same nature in the void according to the patterns on it. Finally, the node was positioned. The ring of blood intent belonged to the category of simple and unadorned cloth. Even if Luo Nan readjusted his perspective and gradually added various elements to restore it to a more superficial level, it wouldn't be that complicated. But Luo Nan himself was different. The weaving method of his structure was far too complicated. Millions upon millions of warp and weft lines, hundreds upon thousands of curtains, convolving and crisscrossing. They were capable of extreme changes to form a node such as himself. It was worth noting that not everyone could form a node. Even though Luo Nan was currently in the Shangding building, the area with the highest concentration of ability users in Xia City, there were only 3 to 5 such nodes. As for the ones that could be considered stable, there was only one. The weaving method had a very strong flavor of the logic realm. There was no need to mention it. It was President Ouyang. Buzz. His wristband vibrated, startling Luo Nan awake from his thoughts. His train of thought had wandered too far. 10 minutes of homework time was up. He forced himself to turn his attention back to the Ring of Blood Intent. Though the weaving method of the Ring of Blood Intent was simple, it was one of the few nodes that could exist stably. This was especially true when over 1,000 participants continued to throw themselves into it. The monotonous technique was able to accumulate a considerable sense of existence. From this, Luo Nan was able to confirm that his lecture and the corresponding experiments were a great success. Chapter 567. The vanguard who held a skeptical attitude and acted as the spearhead was none other than Zhang Ji, the paid guest of the live show, RE. However, his skepticism this time had the feeling that he was being forced into a corner. Things started when the homework time was nearing its end. Other than the ability users of Xia City still practicing in the public space on the psychic wave network called the Ring of Bloodlust, the audience of the live show had already finished what they could. Those who couldn't had no hope and returned to their activity level one after another. The top students exchanged their experiences on the forums, the octopus spammed in the live broadcast room, and the honest man watched Ghost Eye's fancy car racing. There was also another type of person, such as the proud and elated Miss Zhang Yingying. She relied on her absolute beauty and charm to gather a group of temporary fans. She would take revenge for injustice and revenge for enmity. In short, she wouldn't let RE, who was the leader, have an easy time. In terms of strength, RE, as a B-rank powerhouse, could basically crush Zhang Yingying. But in terms of eloquence, Zhang Yingying really went all out with Luo Nan's series of miraculous performances. She started with RE's initial spiteful actions, to the series of messages left on the forums, and then to the comments made by the show's guests. She pulled out each and every line and whipped RE into a sorry state. However, RE relied on her many years of popularity on the main site's forums and the conflict between headquarters and Xia City. She also gathered a group of people and bitterly held on. She managed to achieve chaos but not collapse. Once the situation entered a critical state, it would often enter a sweeping mode. Rational debate was impossible. Both sides, Xia blows, and discrimination dogs, were just a warm-up. MMP and TMD were normal ammunition. As for things like, I have 300 pieces of your mother, and the like, they were flying all over the sky. So much so that the super administrators of the live broadcast room, forums, and other communication platforms raised their butcher knives and killed until heads rolled. But the super administrators couldn't control the two guests who were cursing each other through the screen. Especially RE. She was already dizzy from Zhang Yingying's verbal abuse. Finally, after she received the phrase, honey-sucking mommy, she erupted brainlessly, I'm afraid I won't feel good. I'm kneeling and licking without limit. I'm going to max beep beep beep. Under the gaze of 30,000 viewers in the live broadcast room, her actions were enough to destroy her image. Even among his allies, there were many who despised him for losing his composure. Seeing that Zhang Yingying could easily reap the lives of others with her high profile, someone just had to interfere. Ghost Eye had probably seen enough of Luo Nan's information in the physiognomy program. He cut into Zhang Ji's live broadcast under the watchful eyes of the audience. He left a message in the open, let's bet. One is stepping on the other, and the other is supporting him. There's no point in tormenting each other anymore. Now, it's time to bet on the winner. Not to mention how black the face of the director of the Reading Physiognomy program team was, how the person in charge of the platform behind Zhang Ji's live broadcast was laughing his head off. The two programs were forced to merge under the urging of Ghost Eye, who wanted to see the world in chaos. What's more, this old brother started racing. Let's set up our financial chips first. That beauty Zhang, Re said that she's that. Can you tolerate that? He absolutely could not tolerate this. But it's a gamble, so you have to face the difficulties head on. How about this, if you lose, you have to admit it. Get that Mr. Luo of yours to film a live scene to verify it. It has to be a front view without any mosaics, at least 15 seconds. Did Ghost Eye hear the 30,000 people booing in unison? Obviously not. He faced Zhang Yingying's middle finger at the camera and displayed his unparalleled shamelessness. What? I'm very fair. That Re, didn't she also accept the hat of a honey jar mommy and honey-sucking mommy? We definitely can't tolerate this. Let's face the difficulties head on. Speaking of which, it's too bad to find your mother. How about this, teachers are like parents. If you lose, find your Deputy Secretary General Gong. Don't ask for anything else, just sprinkle some honey on his chest and lick it for 15 seconds. What grudge? What a genius idea. Deputy Secretary General Gong Mi is right. Motherf *Ker, the association's #1 scumbag is finally settled. Is this a gamble? It's a gamble. Goddess Re, you can just cut your own throat now. If it were anyone else, Re would have cursed back 100 times. However, facing Ghost Eye, who stole the show, he was already covered in cold sweat. He didn't have the guts to fight back, but he couldn't ignore it either. He could only grit his teeth and say, Mr. Che, you can joke, but don't drag my teacher into this. Ghost Eye laughed. So you know it's a joke. So don't worry, we won't use a real person. We can use a photo. It's a normal game of adventure, it won't hurt anyone's feelings. Re almost vomited blood in the projection area. Don't hurt anyone's feelings my ass. If he really did that, Gong Chi would tear him apart the moment he came out of seclusion. On the other hand, Zhang Yingying was absolutely in love with him. She might even be willing to do it in person, let alone a photo. Perhaps because she heard that she could take advantage of the situation, Zhang Yingying slapped the armrest of her seat and said generously, what's there to be afraid of if it's just a photo? Let's bet. Impossible. Re wouldn't waste his life. Even if it was Ghost Eye, he had to hold on. Ghost Eye wasn't angry. What, you don't have confidence? Of course, Re couldn't show weakness here. He wanted to get rid of the focus as soon as possible, so he racked his brains and refuted, that bloody will ring might be a good way to show off, but there's no proof of its real effect. Using a simple structure to reduce the difficulty is stable. Using a baffling verification method is called stable. How can you be sure it's stable? That's right, he was the one who set the standard of stability. Even the cage theory was created by him. This kind of imaginary theory and standard is all his personal definition. On the other hand, the universal theory and standard of 3 levels, 1 zone, 1 domain, is negated. Doesn't that mean that he's using his own standard to judge himself? I can do it if you want me. Yes, that's a reason. Ghost Eye, on the other hand, seemed to be accepting the advice. This kind of interaction was much more interesting than chatting with the vase host. He chuckled and said, what you mean is that we can gamble, but there must be a common and fair evaluation standard. Bet your MP. Of course, Re wouldn't jump into the pit. He bit down, I absolutely won't bet as long as it involves my teacher. This has nothing to do with winning or losing, and it has nothing to do with confidence. It's a matter of respect. Ghost Eye slapped his knee forcefully. Well said, but you don't have that kind of respect for Luo Nan, right? It's done. Let's get this done in one go. We'll use a fairer method. Let's use photos. Let's change them all to Luo Nan's photos. Only the body parts are different. One beep beep, the other beep beep. That'll do. Oh. There was no doubt that this was a scene that would cause tens of thousands of people to burst out laughing. Everyone who was watching this impromptu mixed program spat out their food. Even the idle people in the circular conference room were hard-pressed to escape. A buzzing sound rang through the conference room, disturbing the attention of everyone else. Luo Nan had just been woken up on the podium at this time. He saw the situation in the conference room, especially the changes in the configuration of the group consciousness that had taken shape on the mental plane. His brows furrowed. He knew where the influencing factors were. Was that extremely thick-skinned old man of the outer seas playing cheap tricks out of boredom, or was he deliberately tormenting the audience this time? Luo Nan knocked on the podium in an attempt to call back everyone's attention. Indeed, the majority of people responded. However, on a deeper level, there was quite a bit of difference from the absolute concentration they had before. No matter how cheap Ghost Eye was, he was still an extraordinary. He naturally possessed the gimmick to attract attention. That person's personality was extremely shameless. If he really tormented the audience, it would have a direct detrimental effect on the construction and stability of the blood intent ring. Chapter 568. Realistically speaking, Luo Nan was the undisputed focal point of Zhang Ji's live broadcast and the viewing program. It was just that he had never thought of interacting with the audience of these two programs in the past hour or so. This was not within the scope of his mission tonight. Her Majesty Empress Wu would not give him a few more points for this. But now he had spoken, and he had spoken so naturally. This intense feeling of interaction immediately set off another wave of overflowing laughter from the surrounding audience. Soon, the participants in the circular conference room were swept in as well. It was unknown who started whistling, but the person even adopted a strange tone. This wave of dog food has caught us off guard. The sudden tone aroused a wave of laughter in the conference room. Then the atmosphere could no longer be suppressed. Even those who had not watched the program had to make up for it at the last minute, let alone those who had been paying attention the entire time. Zhang Yingying was a beautiful, energetic girl. She was intelligent and generous. She had a wide circle of friends. She was quite popular in Xia City. Everyone knew that she could take a joke, so they didn't hold back. Yingying, when did you make your move? What kind of logic is this? Why is Yingying the one taking the initiative? Boss Luo, we support you. Isn't the main point about when to start before the age of 16? Zhang Yingying sat in the center of the live broadcast area. Her eyes quickly blinked a few times. Her cheeks had heated up from the awkwardness of being pushed. She could not calm down for a while. She wanted to refute, but the dirty old man in the open sea chuckled and spoke from a distance. Professor Luo, I'm your supporter. Tens of thousands of people can testify. We stand on the same side. I agree with everything you say. What's there to gamble about? Of course, if you're not satisfied with the gambling stakes, we can change our positions. In any case, it's just a joke. At this very moment, the spectators in every city all over the world had a similar evaluation in their minds. Scum with no bottom line. In any case, Ghost Eye Che-E was an extraordinary level power. He stood at the peak of human evolution. Don't ask him to put on airs every day, but you can't lower yourself to the mud without limit. Che-E, this old bastard. Over at the maintenance center, Gao Meng's face scrunched up as he watched. He was truly worried. Luo Nan, this pure and innocent youth, would be thrown into the pit by Ghost Eye in just a few rounds. Ouyang, we can't just watch as that guy wrecks the place. Ouyang Chen earnestly observed the changing data in the projected work area. He didn't even turn his head when he heard Luo Nan's words. Didn't he say that he agreed with Luo Nan's theory? Hey, his bullsh***, when it comes to the fundamental point of view, even a fart can hit a nail. Ah. While Gao Meng was distracted, Luo Nan opened his mouth once more from the podium. However, he didn't directly respond to Ghost Eye. Instead, he lowered his head to look at the voting system within the venue and read out a few numbers: 0154, 0198. 2446, the 14 people whose seat numbers have been read out have failed the Ring of Blood and Will. If he had the intention to post comments online, he could have sent half of it over. That way, he wouldn't have taken so long. Luo Nan's expression was grave and solemn. This sort of situation shouldn't have occurred, especially since the nodes of the blood intent ring and the condensation ring of his clairvoyance had been connected and fused together. His course was complete in both theory and reality. It was time to reap the fruits of his labor. But because of Ghost Eye's unscrupulous prank, it caused a flaw to appear. Who could he find to reason with? Of course, a failure rate of 1% would not affect the construction of the group structure of the Ring of Blood and Will. It was just that he could have scored 100 points, but he was forcefully marked as a 99. This caused his obsessive-compulsive disorder to act up. He changed the digital pen stroke color to blood red and heavily circled these 14 numbers. Then he tossed the pen down and supported himself on the podium with his hand as he looked around the venue. Merely 2 seconds later, the roaring laughter and restlessness within the venue were erased one after another, until everything returned to nothingness. Densely packed seat numbers appeared in the work area, as well as the precise positioning of 14 red circles. This caused the participants to suddenly come to a realization. According to the explanation of the cage theory, Luo Nan was currently using an overwhelming method to simultaneously invade nearly 1,500 ability users who were present. Luo Nan had a complete understanding of their movements on the mental plane like the back of his hand. 5 seconds ago, the 1% who had been labeled had more or less some emotions. It wasn't as if no one wanted to straighten their necks and retort back. But now, they were faced with the gazes cast over from front to back, especially the cold and heavy gaze of that person on the podium. The little bit of rebellious mentality they had was like a wasteland swept by a great fire. It was completely turned to ashes. At this moment, they wished they could bury their heads in their crotches or simply hide under their chairs. Perhaps they would be able to breathe a bit of flowing air that way. Luo Nan opened his mouth once more in this suddenly silent and oppressive atmosphere of the venue. These 14 people. Everyone believed that Luo Nan was going to continue to work hard and continue to berate them. But they never expected the latter half of his words to suddenly fly several hundred kilometers away. These 14 people were eliminated by your joke, Senior Ghost Eye. Does this result deviate from your conjecture? If the deviation really does exist, why can't you make a gamble? In the viewing program studio, Ghost Eye still had a smile on his face, but his figure leaned back. His eyes narrowed even more, and the rays of light through the slits cut across the live screen. He was a bit mindful of the word conjecture that Luo Nan spoke of. Ghost Eye really wanted to retort with a question: did you guess it, or did you really discover something? In the circular conference room, Luo Nan continued to speak. Let's bet on the one you guessed but haven't confirmed yet. Do you want to bet yes or no? Or do you want to add a time limit or something? Ghost Eye's eyelids twitched. At this moment, he simply suspected that his cage had been violated. Though he didn't want to admit it, Luo Nan's stance had indeed affected his choice. His thoughts spun like lightning, and the corner of his lips perked up in an exaggerated manner. Gambling is just a game. It's purely for fun. So, if Professor Luo really wants to play, it's fine to add another level. The onlookers, both online and offline, were restless at this moment. This was a tit for tat. They were going to fight for real. Even if it was just gambling for fun, was the genius youth of Xia City going to fight against extraordinaries? Speaking of which, the scene a few days ago wasn't that bad. It was just that Her Majesty Empress Wu had interfered and interrupted it. However, the global audience had overestimated Ghost Eye's bottom line. All they saw was Ghost Eye twisting in his chair, assuming a more comfortable posture. Then he extended a finger. When it comes to making a bet, I always confirm the chips first. Only when the chips are equal can the stakes be placed on the table. Professor Luo, Brother Luo, though I really support your opinion and am your staunch supporter, are you prepared to make a bet with an extraordinary? The stakes must be at the extraordinary level. Frankly speaking, this is quite difficult for you. As he spoke, Ghost Eye gestured to the camera in the studio to give him a close-up. Look, because I'm an extraordinary, my selfie is also at the extraordinary level. You can't use your own selfie to exchange. Yeah, you can consider a martial emperor. Boos converged on the internet from all over the world. Ghost Eye looked on casually, waiting for the end of the story. However, Luo Nan nodded from the rostrum of the circular conference room. The extraordinary level. Things worn by me count. Chapter 569. Luo Nan did not continue to tangle with Ghost Eye. His attention shifted, switching his consciousness to a certain corner within the range of the soul cloak. The specific location was a certain subway station in the waterfront district of Xia City. His spiritual senses moved towards the material plane and locked onto an unknown storage box. The interior of the box was pitch black, but it didn't affect his mental senses in the slightest. Luo Nan could clearly see the thick and broad iron hoop that was placed randomly inside. He used his consciousness to engrave and store it. Then, he used the psychic wave network to transcribe it into a readable image file. Now, there was no problem with printing and displaying it. Luo Nan thought for a bit after he finished doing these things. He linked with the Wraith sign, drawing upon the Blood Soul Temple within his body. A streak of bloody light fell onto a certain restroom in the subway station. Soon, a figure appeared over there. It was Mo Luan. Of course, the current Mo Luan III was a puppet of the Blood Soul Temple's third floor. This Grand Elder of the Blood Flame Order was still in the same appearance he had when he last appeared. Even his clothes had been replicated in a lifelike manner. However, if one were to touch it, one would feel the stickiness of blood. Mo Luan III came out of the bathroom and walked through the stream of people in the station like an ordinary person. He arrived at the nameless storage box, entered the password, and took out the metal headband inside. The metal headband was the signature item that Jean Tong had worn when he was alive. It was also the so-called God-binding headband in the virtual brain system. It was the most critical component of the emergency combat equipment that he built. As the situation became more and more complicated, Luo Nan would most likely need to use this toy to protect himself. There was no meaning in shelving it. Most likely, he would need to use it in front of others. Since that was the case, it was better to find a good opportunity for it to appear. Right now was a good window. Luo Nan told Mo Luan III to take this hot toy to Acumen College's gear building. Luo Nan told Mo Luan III to guard it properly. When he had the time, Luo Nan would start researching and using it. This chain of events was controlled by Luo Nan's consciousness. During this time, Luo Nan also split a portion of his attention to pay attention to the circular conference room. He paid attention to the gambling house he proposed. Ghost Eye would never be proper. Though he was shaken by Luo Nan's suggestive words, he soon rubbed his hands, squinted his eyes, and giggled, something to wear. Are you talking about the original taste of a martial emperor? If that's the case, then it's definitely not a problem. Luo Nan would absolutely not give any direct response to these kinds of remarks. But inside and outside the arena, the people who were paying attention to the development of the situation could not help but feel stifled. This. In the conference room, Zhang Yingying almost smashed Zhang Ji's camera down. Even when she was being teased, she didn't react so violently. Damn, I respect you for being a scum. This is getting more and more out of hand. How can we tolerate this? Why can't I tolerate it? Since there's Ms. Gongmi, why can't there be a martial emperor's original flavor? It's fair and square. You can't blame him for being an extraordinary. If he wasn't, he would have died a long time ago. The ability users of Xia City and those not from Xia City suddenly came to a sudden realization after a round of argument. Ghost Eye, this unrefined old man, was simply a jinx. Or perhaps he was a mottled old poodle who dissed the heavens, the earth, and the air. As long as he messed things up, he would be able to get what he wanted. The surrounding audience was deeply moved, while the people from the production team were the ones who felt the pain in their hearts. Backstage, the producer, the director, and the others looked at each other in dismay. They felt as if they had entered the mutual enrichment phase with the poodle. The sea they were in was only 500 kilometers away from the coastline of Xia City. Did they really think that Her Majesty Empress Wu wouldn't kill her way over? When the time came for the two extraordinaries to fight, wouldn't the men, women, old, and young of the ship have to go fill the sea? The divine binding hoop had already been transferred over to the subway station at this time. Luo Nan was able to shift all of his attention back. He watched Ghost Eye's performance with cold eyes. However, he paid attention to one thing. Compared to Ghost Eye's unscrupulous attitude, Ghost Eye never stopped probing and evaluating in the special domain. From this perspective, Ghost Eye's attitude was extremely proper and cautious. Ghost Eye's tasteless words and actions were nothing more than a cover. Or perhaps it could be said that this was his personal favorite rhythm. Luo Nan was disinclined to pay attention to other people's hobbies. But right now, the normal state of the classroom had already been destroyed by Ghost Eye's personal rhythm. Luo Nan didn't want Ghost Eye to continue tormenting him. He retrieved a file and set it to display, making it appear in the work area. The results of the consciousness transcription were pretty good. At the very least, Luo Nan felt that it was quite clear. He rapped on the lectern, indicating for Ghost Eye to come over. I only have this one thing in my hands. Just say the word if you want to bet. Before Luo Nan's voice could completely fall, Ghost Eye, who was 500 kilometers away, seemed to have his back replaced with a spring. He instantly sprang up from the back of his chair, and his eyes and nostrils enlarged. Before these body movements and facial changes could stretch to their limits, Ghost Eye had already spoken decisively. I'll bet. Luo Nan grunted and cut off the image. Then let's talk about the requirements of the bet. Wait. I want to inspect the goods. Didn't you see it? Where's the real thing? Luo Nan looked over with great astonishment. It was like he was looking at a mental patient. You're talking about betting on photos. Ghost Eye's expression was brilliant in this moment. It was unprecedented. Some people in the venue couldn't help but burst into laughter. But this laughter inexplicably became quite abrupt. The people who had laughed were a bit stupefied. They subconsciously looked left and right, but all they saw were lifeless, blank, or stiff faces. In short, they were all expressions of abnormal experiences. When put together, it was enough to stand on equal footing with Ghost Eye. It was also at this moment that a strange change occurred in the atmosphere of the venue. Some people craned their necks to look at the stage, even though they only saw the image of Assistant Number 1 and the blood will hoop. Some people subconsciously exchanged opinions. What's in the photo? I didn't see it clearly. I probably didn't see it clearly either. Compared to the limited reaction time and number of people present, there were far too many methods on the internet to take screenshots. There was also the foundation and atmosphere of high-speed diffusion and amplification. So it was no surprise that the matter exploded on the internet. 5 seconds after Luo Nan switched off the photo, someone posted a relevant screenshot on the main website forum. Compared to the clear image, the thoughts of the speaker were clearly in chaos. Oh! Did I just see a murder scene? This thing. Holy sh*t. It's a headband. It's actually a headband. I'm so scared I'm looking for a fish on the ground. Several people followed the thread, but none of them dared to reveal their own conclusions. This continued until a hot-headed youngster tore apart this layer of meaningless concealment. This must be the iron hoop gene tongs. F***CKU. Compared to the difficult but basic discussions on the forum, in the live broadcast room, which focused more on visual effects, reason had long since knelt at the feet of boiling emotions, shivering. F asterisk CKF asterisk CKF asterisk CKF asterisk CKF asterisk CK. It was unknown who took the lead, but in the blink of an eye, the live broadcast room was drowned in a waterfall of F asterisk CK. A few noises like F asterisk CK can't be said were interspersed in the middle. The impact of the explosion had already activated visual effects. But attentive people discovered that the number of viewers in the live broadcast room had suddenly dropped by nearly 3% in an instant. Moreover, it was still dropping. Someone sighed with emotion. The good days have come to an end. Overtime to death. Wrong. Overtime to hell. In any case, whether it was participants or spectators, both inside and outside the venue, they all sank into an unreal dream. They were instinctively unwilling to believe their own eyes. Perhaps they had entered a field of restless emotions. It was as if someone had swung a heavy hammer in the unseen world, causing tons of sputtering damage. There was also a dizzying effect. The scope of the effect spread throughout the entire world along with the live broadcast signal. The specific effects were impossible to assess in a short amount of time. Of course, some people maintained their rationality and sobriety from beginning to end. He Yuan immediately contacted Luo Nan through the hexeer. The problem was that Luo Nan's train of thought diverged from hers by habit. He didn't even turn his head. He just gave her a "don't be impatient" gesture. Right now, most of Luo Nan's attention was on the mental plane. Whether it was the Great Sea or the deep space, this endless and deep region was much more restless than it was a few seconds ago. Some people had already forgotten to conceal themselves. Within the deep space of the mental plane, Luo Nan locked onto a limited number of highly complex and stable high-level nodes that were similar to him. The so-called high-level nodes were relative to the application configurations of the blood intent ring and the condensation ring. There was a high probability that these were extraordinary level life forms. President Ouyang was the closest to the Shangding building area. As for the area further away, Her Majesty Empress Wu was in the city district of Xia City. In addition, there were 3 others. 2 of them were swimming far away in the wilderness at the edge of Xia City. The remaining one was in the open sea region. Its position just so happened to coincide with the viewing program crew. It was undoubtedly the Ghost Eye Che-E. At this very moment, President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu's nodes could be considered stable. The other 3 had become super active. They were like vortexes that suddenly accelerated, driving the curtains that formed their nodes. They moved layer by layer and influenced Luo Nan's location on the material plane, projecting all sorts of fine fluctuations. The one who did this the most bluntly was Ghost Eye. This wasn't mental sensing, but it was a higher-level technique. From this, Luo Nan was able to confirm that this group of extraordinaries really did possess some sort of ability to cross large distances and distort the distribution of space-time. However, the restrictions were greater. It wasn't as refreshing as direct mental sensing. In comparison, Luo Nan felt that his own sensing mode was more like that of a normal person with sensitive eyes and ears, 5 senses, and 6 senses. Luo Nan compared the formatting theory's version of absolute observation that his grandfather had single-handedly created and the various clairvoyance modes he discovered on this foundation with the sensing methods of the apex experts of the inner world. It felt as if the virtual brain system and mainstream Earth technology had been placed on a display stand. Luo Nan didn't dare to say that there was a difference between heaven and earth, but it was quite apt to say that there was a difference of a few streets. This wasn't a difference in strength. It was a difference in levels. Needless to say, Luo Nan had a ready-made tool he could use right now. Luo Nan's consciousness was embedded in the configuration node that had already been successfully connected in deep space. Then he stared at Zhang Ji's live feed in front of him. He talked to the undying Ghost Eye. I just looked at the relevant standards. Normal state exploration time is 60 seconds. Combat state is 15 seconds. You can apply for verification. Then I'll invite you to verify right now. 500 kilometers shouldn't be a problem, right? Luo Nan's words had no head or tail. It was like guessing riddles, but those who should understand understood. Those who didn't understand were pondering. For example, Zhang Ji. Her brain spun at lightning speed. 15. That sounds familiar. Since there are specific values, just do a vague search. Find the society's internal database. Ghost. I still wanted to act cheap. Pictures and such are too funny. If it's the real thing. Luo Nan ignored him. He turned to face the participants who were still at a loss and in a state of doubt. Right now, these people were all his students. He needed to let them obtain real benefits from his lessons. This was his promise to Her Majesty Empress Wu. Of course, this promise had long since been fulfilled. Right now, all he needed to do was finish what a patient with invisible obsessive-compulsive disorder needed. Therefore, gambling wasn't the goal. It was just a teaching tool. Luo Nan didn't care whether or not his students were willing to listen. He forcefully changed the course of his previous lecture. A successful configuration of the blood intent ring should maintain stability for a long time. Moreover, it shouldn't take up too much of your soul strength. The vast majority of you have done quite well. At the very least, you are able to maintain your shape after some torment. If no one has any objections, then let's do the last homework for today. We'll return to our main topic, the condensation ring. Frankly speaking, there were nearly 1,500 people present, but there weren't many who could listen to Luo Nan's lecture. Even the group of friends and relatives in the front row had grave expressions. Some even gave Luo Nan hand signals. Their minds had long since flown away from the blood intent ring and the condensation ring. Luo Nan spoke for a while and confirmed this problem. From his perspective, this was fine. The focal point of the circular conference room was still his body. The overall structure of the group consciousness hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was the driving force. The internal power to advance was broken by external pressure. It became directionless bewilderment, doubt, and fear, as well as meaningless restlessness and excitement. All Luo Nan needed to do was to restrain them and give them a new driving force. Internal internalization was not possible, but external pressure was fine. Therefore, he pressed his hand on the lectern and leaned forward slightly. His expression was solemn. Everyone, perhaps I need to remind you of something. I just made a bet with Senior Ghost Eye, and this bet will be completed by me and all of you. If I lose the bet, all I'll lose is a photo. But please believe me. What you'll lose will far exceed your imagination. On the other hand, if I win, you'll obtain a weight that is beyond the scope of your imagination. The conference room was deathly silent under Luo Nan's calm and clear gaze. Perhaps not everyone understood what Luo Nan was saying, but he succeeded in making everyone present experience his will and the feeling of oppression that corresponded with it. Of course, the instantaneous flash of the photo played the role of a catalyst. And at this time, the results of the fuzzy keyword search came out. There were only a few answers in the Society's rigorous database. The first place was validating the effectiveness of the gully region. Zhang Ji's gaze fell upon this entry, and she unexpectedly shivered. Then came the shuddering sensation of interweaving currents of heat and electricity. Chapter 570. Around 9:30 in the evening of December 14, 2096, a large amount of information was relayed to each and every circle, like dust and dirt swirling up in the air. Every time a hand was passed, some would be lost and some would be added. People called it analysis. In any case, each circle had its own understanding of the lecture scene in Xia City's Shangding Building circular conference room. At the same time, they were also guessing the reactions of the other circles. A certain large capital circle, with deep blue base as the center, was currently carrying out related work. New intelligence was constantly being sent in and categorized into different categories and sent to the various authorities participating in remote meetings for discussion. Sandalwood is calling for a meeting. The scope of the meeting is at the level of the President, Vice President, Secretary General, and Deputy Secretary General. Is it because of the confirmed deaths of missing people? Most likely. Then do you want to lead a wave of momentum? We can't let that plagiarist off easy. The formatting theory kid, who made hundreds of billions of investments vanish in a puff of smoke with just a few words, had already been given a new nickname. But this was far from enough to dispel the hatred in Herman's heart. He urgently wanted to do something, and he really could do something. Those idiots at the lobbying company have to prove the value of their existence. Isn't that Hunter Kim an official member of the association? Sandalwood should at least do something. This idea of driving the tiger to devour the wolf was worth discussing. A few of the participants chatted and began to sort out their connections in the upper echelons of the Ability User Association. However, Wang Ju didn't respond from beginning to end. He stared at Zhang Ji's live broadcast and paid attention to the current focus. After a few seconds, he turned his head and asked, "I remember there was a fund last year that went in this direction. The Abyss area and the Polar region, right?" Bald Jeff admitted, "That's right. It was mainly to follow up on the association's related topics. We have no advantage in this area. Is there a specific conclusion?" Jeff shook his head. "Not yet. There are only phenomena." As he spoke, he brought up the relevant information and organized it a bit before continuing. There are 3 types of phenomena that are more common. First, cultivation speed increases. When an ability user's consciousness successfully stays in the Abyss area and maintains stability, their cultivation speed will have a relatively obvious increase. Second, space-time distortion. Ability users can jump through the Abyss area and transmit energy information. The specific phenomena are somewhat similar to wormholes, warp travel, and so on. It greatly increases the area of control. The third is the mark engraving. Ability users can leave their own unique imprint in the Abyss area, making it easier to locate and use. As long as the first time is successful, the difficulty of the subsequent attempts will be reduced accordingly. It seems that one can strengthen their connection with this area through training. After saying this, Jeff glanced around at all the investors and continued to pull data. In the inner world, the Abyss area is an extremely important offensive and defensive area for high-level ability users, especially those with mental strength. According to research, about 20% of B-class psychic abilities would be executed through the abyssal zone, and it was often their life-saving measure. Among the psychic superhumans, that proportion rose to 72%. Due to the problem of sample collection, the numbers were not particularly accurate, but it was basically confirmed that the highest echelons of the inner world had normalized the attack and defense of the abyssal zone. In fact, that includes us as well. The Deep Blue Walker's formatting domain involved the most advanced part of the domain, and they were also coordinated through it. However, our research and use are all copying and copying, which is still relatively shallow. In this aspect, they can't compare to the ICRC's Group AB, especially Tian Bang. It's said that that guy has already reached the standard of a transcendent by relying on the accumulation of the blood flame order. TSK. Sure enough, it's meaningful and beneficial. Wang Ju condensed Jeff's long speech into 6 words. Then he turned to look at Herman. "What do you think Sandalwood City will do in this situation?" Herman's face was cold, and he didn't speak. For the various large circles, everything was still a guess for the time being. Luo Nan didn't mention a single word about the abyssal zone during the lecture in the circular conference room. The topic of his lecture was still the condensation ring. Of course, compared to the beginning of the lecture over an hour ago, the overall atmosphere and mentality were like the difference between heaven and earth. "We did some research before. I know that there are many people present who don't understand the structure of the condensation ring. Speaking of which, how many people are participating in tonight's lecture to learn the structure of the condensation ring?" Luo Nan asked casually, but the people in the lecture hall didn't dare to treat him lightly. They looked at each other in dismay, and then the non-awakened on both sides of the hall raised their hands one after another. This number wasn't small. It accounted for at least 2/3 of the ability users present. Luo Nan laughed when he saw this. "Actually, if you want to learn the condensation ring, the RT-8313 mission post on headquarters website forum is the best way to do so. Her Majesty Empress Wu's demonstration is undoubtedly on the level of a textbook. At most, we can refer to the contents of last year's training course. That's how I came. At least 10,000 people felt stifled in their hearts at this moment. Fortunately, Luo Nan quickly changed the topic. Since there are so many people staring at the condensation ring, then I'll comply with public opinion. At the end of this lecture, I'll demonstrate the structure of the condensation ring a few more times to everyone. It's the same as giving a guide. Is this fine? Sparse responses rang out in the lecture hall. Most people were stupefied. Didn't he say that he was going to gamble? The focus was on the blood will ring. Why did he suddenly jump back to the condensation ring? Luo Nan didn't explain too much. He swiped his hand casually, wiping clean the display diagram in the work area. All that was left was the enlarged version of the condensation ring from before. My demonstration this time will be a bit smaller than the condensation ring. I'll shrink it step by step, and the process will go from slow to fast. Everyone, please follow me if you can. I'll do my best to take care of everyone. I ask everyone to believe that the condensation ring is an art of simplifying and simplifying the structure. You must also believe in your own abilities. It really isn't hard to just apply it. Luo Nan extended a finger as he spoke. He didn't make any other movements, but he had already realized the focus of the gazes of over 1,000 people. The group consciousness that had nearly been scattered by ghost eyes coalesced once more. Luo Nan's gaze cut across the live broadcast camera once more. 500 kilometers away, in the studio of the Reading Perspective program, ghost eyes stared intently at the screen of the circular conference room. He maintained an upright sitting posture at the same time. Only his 10 fingers were crossed in front of his chest. Under the pressure of the shadow of death, the program's director played with hand editing at an extraordinary level. He cut the two people on both sides of the gambling table into the same shot. It was as if they were looking at each other from a distance. The atmosphere was off the charts. Now is the first time. A bloody glow flickered in front of Luo Nan's body as he spoke. It was like the outline of a cinnabar brush, but it was also like a silk spider web. It slowly spread out in the void, snaking and shuttling back and forth. In the instant of drawing, Luo Nan's mind flashed with the scene of intersecting curtains on the mental plane. The scene of nodes being woven together flashed in Luo Nan's mind. In a trance, the void rippled, and an image was embedded within. But this trance only lasted for an instant. In the eyes of over 1,000 participants and 30,000 spectators, the bloody glow in front of Luo Nan's body twisted and turned naturally. There were no obstructions at all. It was extremely nimble. It was like a lustrous flying insect. It fluttered and flowed in the void. The bloody threads of light were the flying insect's dancing trajectories. If one said that it was fast, then each trajectory was slowly drawn and clear. If one said that it was slow, then it was concise and transparent. It was not sloppy at all. Gradually, many people forgot that Luo Nan was carrying out the drawing of a configuration. They only treated it as a dazzling display of skill. In fact, Luo Nan's demonstration this time really wasn't playing for real. It was just another display of an enlarged version of the model. Although the drawing wasn't finished, it was still the size of a human head. Seeing with your eyes and seeing with your heart are different. Just like right now. The rules and laws in my heart are completely different from what appears on the outside. Luo Nan explained in a soft voice as the lines were drawn. His words were mysterious, but they were sincere. Right now, he didn't even have a general idea of the condensation ring in his mind. He only had the curtains in the deep void of his mind. Before, it was the blood will ring. Now it was the condensation ring. The latter's node structure was clearly more complex than the blood will ring. But when one carefully examined the origins of the curtains, they were all classified in the same way. One type originated from the bottom of the self. One type originated from the boundless heaven and earth. The last type originated from the intersection of heaven and earth. There was a vague picture of the three formats of self, society, and heaven and earth. The convergence of the three formats was the node. The exhibit, which was as large as a human head, didn't conform to the requirements of the configuration in terms of form. But in the unseen world, it still followed the true and not false law. Luo Nan could vaguely sense that this method of construction was the deeper mystery of the configuration. If he continued to extend it, it was very likely that he would use this opportunity to take a look at the condensation ring's mode of action on the microscopic level. He would use a special method to bypass the limits of his sensory precision and truly understand its essence. Unfortunately, he was still in class right now. He didn't have the energy to delve deeper. He could only do things more clearly and intuitively. Within the deep void of his mind, the node structures of the condensation ring and the blood will ring appeared at the same time. The two configuration nodes converged together according to his will. The two nodes were slightly distorted, but the direction of the origin of the curtains, as well as the mode of construction, always converged together. The principle didn't change. Under the suppression of the solid configuration principle, the two converging nodes maintained stability. They seemed to fuse together, but their layers were distinct. With such a stable configuration principle and foundation, Luo Nan poured his strength layer by layer. It was like a river flowing into a canal. It divided and watered. It seeped into the soil and penetrated the roots. The thickness was all right. In fact, Luo Nan's strength was no more than a primer. As his first demonstration came to an end, the dancing firefly left behind a bright red trajectory that was deeply engraved in the minds of the majority of the participants. It drew out wisps of subtle psychic power, strands after strand, and converged into a stream. There seemed to be a gurgling sound in the air. It was very faint, like an illusion. It seemed to circulate in the depths of everyone's heart. Beep. Chapter 571. Ouch! Gao Meng subconsciously crushed the paper talisman in his hand into scrap paper. This was already the second time. The last time was when the picture of the iron hoop was presented. Jin Tong's life and death were of course very important, but as a cultivator and a veteran psychic ability user, he couldn't afford to be distracted when it came to high-level topics like the Abyss region. From Gao Meng's perspective, Luo Nan and Ghost Eye's gamble was clearly based on the criteria of entering the Abyss region and successfully staying there. However, there was an unavoidable prerequisite. Gao Meng wouldn't even blink if Luo Nan was able to enter the Abyss region. He subconsciously regarded Luo Nan as one of the most powerful psychic ability users. But from Luo Nan's words, it seemed that he was going to make a huge news. It was hard not to feel uneasy thinking too much. Gao Meng moved to Ouyang Chen's side and stared closely at every change in the system data. The AI's report made Gao Meng's scalp go numb, but he was a bit doubtful when he saw the value. Too small. Is it a miscalculation? The value is meaningless. Ouyang Chen's 10 fingers interlaced to cover his lips. His voice was a bit vague, but his expression was extremely focused. Gao Meng also knew this. Entering the Abyss region with soul strength was a very complicated process. Interference, engraving, observation. All sorts of methods were possible. It was very difficult to have a quantitative standard, and it was even more difficult to express it using secular measurement units. The psychic wave network of Xia City used the temporary standard of headquarters. The value was only for reference. It was more of a question of whether or not it existed. The key was that it was very difficult for a B-rank ability user to observe and grasp such a low value. Did it exist or not? Did Luo Nan enter by himself, or did the gamble require it? He was really anxious to death. In the end, he couldn't hold back and forcefully slapped Ouyang Chen's shoulder. Hey, Ouyang! Give me a definite answer. Ouyang Chen calmly said, the answer of the psychic wave network is my answer. Gao Meng's eyebrows jumped twice. Luo Nan's first demonstration had already ended in the circular conference room. There was chatter on the internet. There were all sorts of things being said, but the conference room was abnormally silent. The bright trajectory remained in the eyes and hearts of most people. Luo Nan's voice broke the strange atmosphere. You should have some idea now. There weren't many people who responded, but Luo Nan didn't care. He casually explained a few of the difficulties that needed to be paid attention to when sketching his consciousness. The structure of the condensation ring wasn't too complicated, but it still had a few more checkpoints than the blood intent ring. Luo Nan didn't expect the several hundred amateurs present to be able to solve everything on their first try. Just as he said, all you have to do is get used to it, get used to this trajectory, get used to my guidance, get used to this pattern. If it had been an hour ago, such a straightforward and old-fashioned way of speaking would have been met with boos. But now, at least in the circular conference room, no one dared to say anything. The atmosphere was solemn and heavy. What Luo Nan did not tell the attendees was that the blood intent ring, which had been hidden behind the scenes, was still playing a more crucial role than the guided learning of the condensation ring structure. Its simple and basic module and cycle structure were the pathways through which the energy and information volatilized by the participants operated. At this time, people's consciousness space was scattered and overlapped. Under the guidance of the module structure, they were arranged neatly and returned to their respective positions. There was overlap and cooperation, but there was very little conflict and internal friction. Luo Nan's blood intent ring structure, consisting of 256 sets and 512 pieces, was the most complex in the entire venue. Right now, he had the authority to lead. He was driving the group consciousness to start at a low gear. He wasn't in a hurry to change gears. Instead, he was accumulating power layer by layer. The attention of nearly 1,500 people present was becoming more and more stable. It was the equivalent of increasing the speed of rotation, maintaining a stable and gentle output. Of course, the condensation ring was the target of concentration. Its function was very important. The two ring-shaped nodes had already been completely docked. The potential development of the interaction between them had just begun. Focus your mind. Let's do it a second time. Luo Nan didn't give the first wave of exhibits too much time to survive. He wiped them away with a casual swipe of his hand, and then he started over again. This time, it was a bit smaller than last time, and the speed was a bit faster. However, not a single person raised the issue of being unable to keep up until the end of this demonstration. Luo Nan was still explaining after the second demonstration was completed. The content of his lecture was the same as the first time, but it was different. There was an emphasis here, and there were hints and explanations for other segments. The attendees present listened attentively. No one felt that Luo Nan was long-winded. They just felt that Luo Nan's every word was able to hit the bottom of their hearts. This really is, Zhang Ji was an awakened after all. Her strength was guaranteed. She had no problems with the relevant understanding. Her thoughts were a bit scattered right now. She had some feelings. She was in the best position. She could see every detail of Luo Nan on the podium in a panoramic manner. But in the last few minutes, there was nothing else in her eyes but that blood-red trajectory. This feeling was extremely marvelous. Zhang Ji wanted to speak in the live broadcast room, but she inexplicably didn't dare to disturb the silence of the venue. She typed out a paragraph of text, something she rarely did. Friends who aren't present here might find it hard to understand the atmosphere of the venue. Whether your eyes are open or closed, there will always be blood-red strokes spinning in front of your eyes. All you need to do is focus your mind and you will be able to follow the strokes. It's just like when my parents held my hand and taught me how to write when I was young. I can barely write now, but the memories of that feeling are still there. It's like there really is someone holding my hand and guiding my attention. Even my thoughts. She paused for a moment and habitually used the word astonished. It looks inconceivable at first glance, but I shudder at the thought of it. But she felt that it was inappropriate after these words appeared on the screen. She added another paragraph to compensate, but I still can't help but want to learn. This is because the blood-red trajectory floating in the air is truly exquisite, beautiful, and perfect. It's as if the condensation ring should be like this. Its configuration should be like this. Perhaps my will isn't to bend my knees to Luo Nan, but to salute to the truth. She didn't even have the time to look at the audience's response after she sent these few paragraphs of text. She saw Luo Nan raise his hand on the stage. Third time. Zhang Ji immediately tossed everything aside. She placed all her attention on the blood-red trajectory that was gradually taking shape. However, the participants, including her and Long 7, who were preoccupied with other things, were completely unaware that the model of the condensation ring had actually shrunk by a large margin. The current scale could already be constructed and used normally. In other words, it had leaped into the millimeter scale. The consciousness of the participants had already unwittingly broken through the barrier between the material and the mental. Everything they saw, felt, and knew blended together, becoming indistinguishable from one another. Only the viewers online discovered this point. They could no longer see the condensation ring. Many people reminded, shouted, and complained, but Zhang Ji did not respond at all. Only the live broadcast camera and the spy equipment continued to work with the help of artificial intelligence, transmitting every detail of the scene to the entire world. A faint gurgling sound rang out in the air once more. This time it was no longer an illusion. It was real. And it was at this moment that the live broadcast screen inexplicably turned hazy. A layer of rippling light faintly appeared on the screen, and thin smoke appeared in the room at some unknown time. The smoke weaved into a crisscross web and then spread out. Hiss. Gao Meng didn't know whether he should feel regret or rejoice. Due to the bet between Luo Nan and Ghost Eye, he was unable to participate in the experiments of the blood intent ring and the condensation ring due to his duty. But if he were to enter, how would he be able to see such a marvelous scene? The value displayed by the warning module hovered around the 1000th percentile, but the staff member reported other key data. The model conversion ratio is 59.2%. The interference rate is 5.2%. 5.7%. It has broken through 6. And it's still rising. The speed at which the data rose exceeded the speed of speech. The interference rate of the SVIP-09 model had already broken through 7 before the staff member's voice had even faded away. And the momentum of the increase was extremely fierce. Gao Meng's gaze was locked onto the data, but the speed at which his brain spun was unable to keep up. He subconsciously said, "The model conversion ratio is too low." Ouyang Chen nodded slightly and immediately gave an order. Connect SVIP-06. Adjust according to the sniffing results. Confirm the combination. Automatic correction. SVIP-06 model was the dripping sword created by Her Majesty Empress Wu. Just 5 seconds after Ouyang Chen gave the order, the conversion ratio of the combination of the two models jumped to 94%. And it was still rising slightly. Looking at the interior of the circular conference room, the water vapor was like a thin mist, but it had a texture that mist did not possess. It undulated in the void like a delicate gauze tent swaying in the wind. It was in contact with everyone in the conference room, but it was also faintly independent, forming its own law. Is this the effect of the condensation ring? Gao Meng felt that it didn't seem like it. But after some thought, he felt that it was very normal. It really is a fusion of two rings. Does this count as SVIP-10? If this counts, I'm afraid I won't be able to make it. Ouyang Chen pushed up his glasses. His expression was much more relaxed. He smiled and said, "Bloody will ring, this name is too casual. How about 100 connect ring?" Gao Meng choked. His logic was correct. You mean to say that this is a super support, and it has the effect of a buff halo? I think it's more like an incubator, a greenhouse. Then let's call it Bloody will ring. At the same time, Gao Meng saw that the interference rate had already reached 10%. In other words, the interference power of the current integrated model was enough to support a decent battle. As for the abyssal region, the measured value could only be said to be stable. There were almost no fluctuations. If it existed, it could only be described as a bud. The question was, did it really exist? Up until now, Gao Meng himself could not sense it. As for what the extraordinaries thought, 500 kilometers away, in the studio of the Viewing Physiognomy program, Ghost Eye was still sitting upright. However, his interlaced fingers had been gently flicking since 10 seconds ago and had gradually gained a rhythm. The beautiful host, Dan E, had wanted to interrupt and find an explosive point. But the moment she turned her head, she was unconsciously dazzled by Ghost Eye's withered fingers. When she came back to her senses, she saw that his hands had already formed a stable and strange hand seal. At the same time, Ghost Eye raised his head. Their gazes met, and Danny felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if she was completely exposed in front of someone and then pierced by an invisible sharp blade. The blade followed along her muscles, blood vessels, and muscles, and was sliced apart. She could hear the sound of a blade slicing through flesh and bone, and also the chirping of ghosts, penetrating her heart and mind. After that, her mind was completely blank. There was only an instinctive shudder and fear that instantly enveloped her entire body. Chapter 572. The alert system of the abyssal region sounded once more. This time, there was no need. Ghost Eye exerted force, and it was as if fireworks had been set off overhead. The ghostly flames flickered and extinguished in the abyssal region. The fear and awe that Danny suffered was child's play. Even if a mental-type extraordinary exerted force did not interfere with the material plane, the pressure it exerted in the mental domain was enough to affect all ability users in the relevant areas. This included the ordinary people of the secular world who were unaware of it. There was nothing to be done. Even extraordinaries could not treat a distance of 500 kilometers lightly. They had to fully utilize the environment of the abyssal region and forcefully distort space and time in order to effectively touch it. In this way, it was simply an impossible task to perform a technique that did not contain any smoke or fire. At least 100 million people in Xia City will have nightmares tonight. Gao Meng took out a paper talisman and twirled it between his fingers. Under normal circumstances, Xia City was guarded by two great extraordinaries. Ghost Eye's straightforward and direct attack would have pushed him back into the sea before he could even reach the shore. But Luo Nan had made a bet with someone else. Not to mention Ouyang Chen, even Her Majesty Empress Wu had no reaction. Clearly, they had tacitly agreed. Oh, it wasn't just that. Ouyang Chen gave another order at this time. SVIP-09 model, preparing to detach. Execute in 30 seconds. Gao Meng crushed the paper talisman again. He didn't have the time to feel sorry for it. He went up and pressed down on Ouyang Chen's arm. What are you doing? Why do you want it to detach? Ouyang Chen answered, it just so happens that Ghost Eye is about to enter the battlefield. Let him accept his defeat wholeheartedly. Gao Meng looked at the back of Ouyang Chen's head as if he was an idiot. Did you take drugs? Ouyang Chen turned his face and a smile blossomed. What I mean is that the blood will ring has taken shape and can already operate independently. The support of the psychic wave network is meaningless. Really? From beginning to end, it only needs a medium or springboard. Even without the psychic wave network, a simple amplification device is enough. This is its marvelous aspect. Also, the current flow of energy and information in the blood will ring is actually separated by the psychic wave network. Only by detaching the psychic wave network can it fuse into one. Gao Meng grunted in acknowledgement. He finally remembered that in class, many people didn't have enough ability and needed to use the psychic wave network as a support to form the structure of the blood will ring. But correspondingly, there were quite a number of people who didn't need such support. After the psychic wave network was opened, a portion of the people entered it, but there were also some who were too lazy to do so. Under such circumstances, it was a small miracle that the ring of blood will could still operate without any problems. He did not ask any more technical questions. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Ouyang. By the way, Ouyang, aren't you a little excited? Otherwise, it was rare for him to be so proactive. Without waiting for Ouyang Chen's reply, the Abyss region's warning system had already displayed the latest detection results. Standard unit of force in Gully region. This was the power of the ghost eyes suppression. Due to the complex calculation standards and different application methods, it was difficult to use secular standards to convert. However, Gao Meng knew that even if he exerted his full strength and used the most explosive means, the measured value would not exceed 3 standard units, and that was only the instantaneous limit. The ghost eye was able to maintain a value of over 10 even at a distance of 500 kilometers. This was an insurmountable gap in terms of level and realm. Its corresponding powerful force had the function of repelling all external imprints and power. Gao Meng's soul strength had only circled around the periphery of the Abyss region when he felt the chirping of ghosts seep into his soul. Half of his skull went cold. Motherf *****. He's playing for real. Ouyang Chen grunted. He's always been very serious. Gao Meng looked at the value on the other end. The spinning thousandths and the even more glaring 0 made the other half of his skull throb with pain. Luo Nan had already finished his third demonstration within the circular conference room. He didn't need to demonstrate anymore. There were 1,477 people in the conference room. There were already 1,469 people who had entered the force field of the Ring of Blood Will. They revolved around the condensation ring and continued to use their consciousness. There were still 8 people left. Their abilities were lacking, and their attention had been broken by Ghost Eye and the chaotic battle online. In the end, they weren't able to catch the last bus. They had already been excluded. Luo Nan wasn't willing to let them disturb the state of the others, so he used hypnosis to knock them out and marked out their seat numbers. He turned his head to greet He Yueyin, who was frowning in silence, and asked her to help handle the situation. He Yueyin silently stood up. She gave him a rare glare and said in a low voice, "Don't get distracted." She informed the security team backstage as she spoke, ordering them to make preparations to deal with any accidents. Luo Nan smiled. His finger streaked across Worker Zhai, who was next to He Yueyin, the group of friends and relatives in the front row, and even the entire quiet conference room. As long as they don't get distracted, we'll win. Luo Nan had clearly forgotten at this time that there were still 30,000 people outside the conference room who had already entered the Ring of Blood Will. They could see the situation on the stage through the live broadcast camera. The spectators, who had been forcefully excluded from the scope of the lecture 3 minutes ago, exploded with resentment. The live broadcast room was instantly bathed in blood. Professor Luo has raised a good flag. Lord Ghost Eye, you're being looked down upon. Show off. Brag until the explosion. Sit and wait for the explosion. Explosion +1. Explosion +2. Explosion +10086. The resentment of the spectators had already taken effect on the illusory thundercloud within the electromagnetic field. Luo Nan's consciousness cut through it, but he didn't care. Rather than paying attention to this, it was better to take a look at the effects of the Ring of Blood Will. As for Ghostly Chirp, who was already shuttling through the curtain of night in Xia City, see you in a bit. The Ring of Blood Will had constructed a complete force field. The solid foundation of the configuration was already in place. Luo Nan's guidance was complete. Flowing water poured into the canal constructed by the Ring of Blood Will in an unending stream, raising the water level within the canal. Was this flowing water the sole strength of the people in the room? Not entirely. From Luo Nan's perspective, the complete driving force should include the overlapping consciousness of over 1,000 people. It came from over 1,000 people surrounding the condensation ring, a single goal, consciously and unconsciously participating with their wisdom. Every time Luo Nan sketched out a detail, over 1,000 people would imitate it. And the imitations of these over 1,000 people were all different. Originally, it was impossible to share these experiences with others. But in the marvelous environment constructed by the Ring of Blood Will, in front of a clear and focused target, all the impossibilities became possible. This was just like when Luo Nan first practiced with the condensation ring. It was a one-time, large-scale, high-volume output, screening, and comparison. In the environment constructed by the Ring of Blood Will, this output, screening, and comparison was amplified several dozen times over. Even if the quality of each individual wasn't excellent, Luo Nan had established a stable and high-quality structure. They already had an excellent direction, a reasonable arrangement of ranks, and a highly efficient mode of operation. Luo Nan could discard the vast majority of meaningless and trashy thoughts. This was like an enormous, cooperative cloud space. It was a supercomputer pieced together by pure manpower. Luo Nan's consistent guidance over a long period of time finally allowed the group of 1,400 people to form a stable group consciousness. It was a structure that could efficiently utilize the latent potential within them. In a certain sense, people didn't lack power. They just lacked the understanding to properly apply power. When the consciousness of 1,000 people in the Ring of Blood will reached a consensus, the final bit of running-in work was completed. This result came from the hearts of everyone, but it also transcended everyone. They successfully constructed it out of nothingness. From nothing to something, from small to large, from fabricated to real. Perhaps it was still extremely weak in nature, in danger of collapse at any time. But this result was under the protection of the Ring of Blood Will. It was within an incorporeal yet spacious fortress. Oh right, I nearly forgot to tell you. The name of the Ring of Blood Will in the virtual brain system was Fortress. Zhang Ji was a bit absent-minded right now, but she also had some understanding. She had once been to the largest and only spaceport in the solar system, Ceres Base. That was the home port of the Space Defense Fleet. It was the largest man-made celestial body ever constructed in the history of humanity. The base could accommodate 20 different types of space shuttles at the same time. There were over 20,000 soldiers stationed there. When she stayed at Ceres Base and faced the vast and boundless universe, she could always feel her own weakness and insignificance. She was exceptionally moved and treasured it. Now, she felt like she was once again at Ceres Base, facing the dark sky that could devour souls. The man-made fortress was both majestic and small, but it was the source of confidence and the only thing she could rely on. The only difference was that she was no longer a tourist, but an indispensable member of the fortress. She had her own position and her own responsibilities. She was an indispensable part of the fortress operating system. It was at this moment, under the joint efforts of hundreds and thousands of comrades like her, that the cold and lifeless fortress was turned on one after another. The power source, transmission pipes, functional areas, and modules were brightly lit. The fortress came to life. It was like a living body. She could even feel the strong life energy flowing through the blood. She received this energy and injected her own strength into it, forming a perfect conduction that pushed it higher and higher. Finally, the pushing force passed a certain threshold, and the powerful, pushing force acted on it. The current Zhang Ji instantly returned. She saw her body that was as solid as a statue, and she also saw everyone else who was in the same position as her. Of course, there was also the swirling mist muslin that was floating up and down in a lively manner. Perhaps she was a bit flustered for a moment, but this slight change in her mind was no longer able to resist the powerful driving force. All stray thoughts were annihilated like smoke in a puff of smoke. Only Luo Nan's clear instructions penetrated her heart and entered her brain, forming the only thing she could rely on. Chapter 573. Beep 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 beep. The early warning system of the Abyss region emitted a sharp and urgent alarm. The distorted lines and colors on the direct view of the force field seemed to have evolved into a storm. Although the Abyss region itself was a never-ending storm tide, the entry of Ghost Eye's extraordinary power brought about an even more chaotic and berserk attack. Ouyang Chen held his chin as he evaluated the destructive power of this storm. He heard someone mumbling behind him. Listening carefully, it sounded like someone was counting 6, 7, 8, 9, what are you doing? It's time. Ghost Eye has already made his move. The standard of 15 seconds can't be wrong. It hasn't started yet. Why hasn't it started yet? The chilly wind is howling in anger. It hasn't blown in yet. Yang Chen pulled out the validation standards for the effectiveness of the abyss region for Gao Meng to see. Although headquarters was often unreliable, the logic of these basic regulations was still relatively strict. The so-called 15 seconds that Gao Meng mentioned and the 60 seconds that Luo Nan had included in the wager were actually a set of standards. It referred to when the power projected into the abyss region reached or approached one standard unit without any obvious interference and maintained relative stability for 60 seconds. The power maintained relative stability under the battle level attack for 15 seconds. The lower limit of the force fluctuation was no less than 0.1 standard unit. If this standard was met, then it proved that this person possessed the ability to explore the abyss region and use it effectively. This person could be ranked among the ranks of first-rate psychic ability users. Of course, Luo Nan wasn't testing Ghost Eye himself. Instead, he was testing Ghost Eye's ability to control people's hearts and gather the power of over 1,000 people to form the blood intent ring. But the principle was the same. Ghost Eye is very restrained right now. Restrained? The hostess over there is so scared she peed her pants. A 500-kilometer attack is considered 1,000 kilometers in ancient times. Even you, Master Gao, would have to burn incense, bathe, and open an altar. At the very least, Ghost Eye hasn't done anything to the Shangding building's surroundings. It's a different story if you insist on going there. Hey, where in the world are you from? Yang Chen adjusted his glasses and laughed calmly. My heart has always belonged to logic and truth. Before Gao Meng could hammer him, Yang Chen raised a finger. What's the value of Luo Nan's work right now? Gao Meng shot a glance. Oh, the 1,000th point is 7. Why? According to this standard, Ghost Eye can choose not to come. Oh. Gao Meng stared blankly for a moment before coming to a realization. As long as Luo Nan's work was unable to reach or approach one standard unit in the abyss region, then Ghost Eye could simply ignore it according to the verification standard requirements. Luo Nan's gamble would be lost without a fight. Of course, other than the standard unit itself, the only ambiguous expression in the verification standard was the word close. This was also a manual correction of the ambiguity of the standard unit. Numerically, it was in the range of 0.7 to 1. In the specific implementation process, some parameters could also be adjusted. However, the basic condition for the parameter adjustment was to be able to make contact with the verifier in the abyss area. In other words, the effect of Luo Nan's work in the abyss region could be maintained at the level of 0.027 dg as long as he could make contact with the Ghost Eye and let the Ghost Eye confirm its existence. But this way, the difference between 60 seconds and 15 seconds would be blurred. This way, Ghost Eye had a lot of room to maneuver. When faced with this kind of situation, shouldn't that uncouth old man just chuckle and wave his hand in a light and breezy manner? Shouldn't he say, well done, well done? Wouldn't that suffocate the other party to death? But Ghost Eye still came, and he went all out as soon as he came. He displayed a meticulous and earnest energy, and he had an imposing manner that was determined to win. This was a bit too far from his uncouth persona. Gao Meng furrowed his brows in thought. Yang Chen's chat time was about to end. He turned his head and continued to dispatch the maintenance team. They carried out a comprehensive and detailed monitoring of this confrontation that had yet to occur. In the end, he said, in this gamble, the time standard is actually meaningless. Whether it's Luo Nan or Ghost Eye, they don't really want to win anything from each other. The so-called extraordinary photograph was just a joke. All they want is a verification. A verification of, yes and no, yes and no. Does the blood intent ring exist? Even Gao Meng himself didn't believe these words. Does the new road sign exist? Does the new road sign exist? It was rare for Yang Chen to sigh with emotion. Gao Meng suddenly gave him a fierce shove from behind. Look! 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 It's going up! It's going up! Only Luo Nan's work could make Gao Meng react like this. Right now, on the value, the 1,000th, which had been fluctuating all this time, showed no signs of stopping. However, the higher percentile began to change as well. It went from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It went up all the way. Just as Gao Meng's voice fell, the value of 10, which had been at 0 all this time, was finally replaced by a value of 1. The change in the value of 10 wasn't as frequent as the percentile and the thousandth, but Gao Meng counted in his mind. He had just counted to 5, and the 1 had become a 2. Another 5, and the 2 had become a 3, in this way, every 5 digits represented an increase. In a short half a minute, the corresponding value had already risen to 0. 713, the momentum was strong, and the increase was stable. It was simply like watching a third-rate stock market war drama. Gao Meng was still yelling, but he subconsciously pinched his throat, afraid that if he breathed too much, he would blow away this dreamlike scene. Do you have to be so awesome? This is already in line with the standard, right? Yang Chen grunted. He was so focused that he didn't give any response. Gao Meng wanted to push Yang Chen's shoulder again, but before he could exert force, he realized that he could completely sense the value within this range. His thoughts turned, and he thought of the shadow cast by Ghost Eye above the abyssal region. His palm shrunk slightly, and he pulled out a paper talisman. He immediately burned it, and his mind followed the curling green smoke to evaporate. Gao Meng felt his scalp go cold as soon as he emerged from the abyssal region. His heart sank. Admittedly, Ghost Eye had managed a great scene in the abyssal region under unrestricted circumstances. But in the surroundings, even in the deeper regions that he was powerless to explore, there existed a few faintly familiar intents. They used various methods to observe the current focal point. MP. Gao Meng cursed, forget about Her Majesty Empress Wu. But what's Tian Bang and the others doing? And, there's also Mountain Lord and Star Shaman. They've been eating dust outside the city for quite a few days. They haven't been able to come in for a cup of tea. It's normal for them to be resentful. The two people Yang Chen spoke of were the two extraordinaries in the outskirts of Xia City. Their purpose in coming was no different from Jin Tong, who had practically entered the gates of hell. Previously, Xia City had been sealed off at every level, not allowing ability users to enter. They were afraid of Yang Chen and Her Majesty Empress Wu. They didn't want to immediately shed all pretenses of cordiality, so they didn't do anything. But now that Luo Nan and Ghost Eye were making a bet, Xia City had opened its mouth. They came in with a face full of saliva. This could be considered as hitting the edge. This isn't fair. Gao Meng fiercely hammered Yang Chen's shoulder as if he was hammering the table in protest. You extraordinaries are playing basketball in the abyssal region. Have you ever thought about Luo Nan's feelings? Yang Chen shrugged. Right now, the upward curve of the blood intent ring is clear. It doesn't show any signs of weakening. The construction of the laws should be extremely stable. Right now, it's in a high-speed growth period of the formation of the mark. How beautiful. Hey! This is a true architect of the abyssal region. He has constructed his own work in the abyssal region. Piece after piece, layer after layer. For a psychic, after completing the foundation of the body and soul structure and leaving the abyssal region, though there is a grand goal in front of them, they have their feet on the ground and concentrate on basic work. Cough. Yang, you've said these words too many times in the past. But there are far too few good examples. Right now, this is probably the best example. Yang Chen continued to cross his fingers and support his chin. He focused on watching the numerical changes in the projected work area, as well as the visual rendering of the force field. It was like he was watching an incomparable masterpiece, the live drawing process. Luo Nan didn't have the self-awareness of drawing a masterpiece. He felt that he was more like a rookie ship captain, leading a group of rookie soldiers into the deep space of the universe where danger lurked on every side. However, this analogy wasn't accurate. Using another inaccurate analogy to describe it, when a space fortress was activated, what appeared on the outside was not a shift in space. Instead, it was a kind of transition in the energy level. There was no process of going up into the heavens or down into the sea. There was just a transition in the energy level. From the colorful and bewildering turbid flow of the mental to the mysterious and unpredictable location of the abyssal region. Then what bombarded the group consciousness of over 1,000 people within the fortress was the endless energy storm within the abyssal region. Luo Nan rarely entered the abyssal region in the past. On one hand, it was because his starting point was too high. The human-faced arachnid brought him to the deepest and highest place the moment he made contact with the mental plane. He was practically above everyone else. On the other hand, it was because the abyssal region gave him an overly chaotic feeling. It was restless all the time. From the perspective of the curtain at first, this was the area where the curtain twisted the most intensely. But from a more comprehensive perspective now, this was simply a storm maze that could tear a person to shreds at any time. Luo Nan relied on pure observation to make a living in the past. He had nothing better to do, so he went here to torment himself. But as his understanding continued to deepen and his cultivation continued to grow, he came to a deeper understanding. Even though the abyssal region was chaotic, it also contained inconceivable resources. It was just like how the deep sea was dangerous, but it also contained rich mineral deposits. Even though the deep space was deathly still, it was filled with even purer energy. For ability users, especially mental ability users, the environment they normally lived in was 1 and 2 was 2. It was very difficult to create miracles. But the abyssal region was different. This place was an extremely dangerous treasure trove that contained miracles. For the sake of improving their cultivation, increasing their realm, and accumulating capital, they thought of every method possible in hopes of breaking through the barrier of the mental plane. They entered this place and gambled with their lives. Chapter 574. The force field of the Ring of Blood will lingered in the abyss area, as weak as a sprout that had just broken through the soil. But things like sprouts were the toughest, because there were spreading roots below it, constantly absorbing nutrients and supplying its needs. The interweaving of spiritual light and wisdom of thousands of people, as well as the infusing of life energy from time to time, was enough to last for a while under the premise that it was used effectively. Moreover, the external environment of this sprout was admittedly still a raging storm, but at the same time, there was also a surge of energy that was as pure as sunlight. The method was a little violent, but it was good that he could absorb it. The structure of the Ring of Blood will ensure the basic efficiency of absorption and maintain the balance of the supply of nutrients from top to bottom. This process had already begun long before Luo Nan and Ghostai made their bet. It had already begun when the Ring of Blood intent was first constructed. It was just that Luo Nan had been the one to protect and maintain it at the time. It couldn't be considered self-sufficient. Only when the 1,469 people entered the circular conference room and became the recruits that supported the operation of the fortress did this sprout truly take shape. And under Luo Nan's clear goals and strategies, the sprout wasn't prepared to immediately become a towering tree after it took shape. It just built a foundation bit by bit, strengthened its roots, and used a steady and conservative method to gradually deepen its imprint in the abyssal region, expanding its domain. In this way, no matter how much the storm in the abyss region raged, it could no longer be destroyed under normal conditions. A simple and clear mark was engraved on it and gradually deepened. Unfortunately, within the space fortress that Luo Nan commanded and controlled, the only one who could truly experience the beauty of this balance of violence and gentleness was him, the captain. The remaining rookies did not have the ability to pull their consciousness out of the cloud space formed by the Ring of Blood and Will. They still needed to familiarize themselves with the new environment, the new pressure, and the new functional conditions. Luo Nan was responsible for giving them directions and cutting down some unnecessary branches. Oh, forgive him for coming to a conclusion a little too soon. Inside the force field of the Ring of Blood will, a few hazy consciousnesses were like early maturing silkworms, nurturing or awakening spiritual lights in the chaos. Even if it hadn't broken out of its chrysalis and become a butterfly, it would only be a matter of a few rounds of stimulation. Which of them had extraordinary aptitudes? Or was it because of the Ring of Blood will? Or could it be that he, as a teacher who was forcing a duck onto a perch, had an outstanding teaching effect? Luo Nan walked a few steps on the podium before suddenly laughing out loud. Just as his smile blossomed, the air flow outside the building suddenly became intense. Together with tiny water droplets, they hit the windows and the walls, forming a restless note. It was as if a ghost hiding in the night was pounding on the door. Now that the demon eye had arrived, the storm in the real world was only a greeting. The energy flow in the abyss region instantly became 10 times more restless. This was the prelude to the true attack. An extraordinary might not be able to do as he pleased in the abyss region, but his attack power against specific areas and targets was absolutely formidable. For example, Ghost Eye's attack was only aimed at the force field of the Ring of Blood in the abyss region. The job of destroying the tender sprouts? Obviously not. As an experienced transcendent, Ghost Eye's methods were both experienced and direct. As the energy flow of the abyss region bombarded the force field of the Ring of Blood there was an even more incorporeal yet profound power. It was like a chilly wind blowing from a crack. It penetrated in from every direction, every angle, and every level in an attempt to directly attack the roots. According to Luo Nan's cage theory, Ghost Eye was using the power of the abyss region to invade the space of consciousness of Luo Nan and the others. He was taking advantage of the situation to break through the barrier between the mental and material planes, digging the soil and digging the roots. This was an open and aboveboard attack without holding anything back. It was undoubtedly a method of the extraordinary level. However, Ghost Eye's methods were ultimately unable to touch the upper limits of the Ring of Blood Will's defensive power. From Luo Nan's perspective, the node of the fusion of the two rings had already taken shape within the mental deep space. It was constantly perfecting itself under the new environment, under the self-conscious correction of the cloud space. In contrast, Ghost Eye's extraordinary power was already an arrow at the end of its flight after crossing 500 kilometers. The projection of the node above the open sea had already shown clear deformations. Even though Ghost Eye was very experienced in making corrections, even going so far as to stimulate the fear in the subconscious minds of the residents of Xia City to form a beneficial environment, Ghost Eye was unable to completely make up for the attenuation brought about by the spatial barrier. As for Ghost Eye's method of digging the roots, the essence of the Ring of Blood Will's function was that of a fortress. Its defensive power was top-notch, and it didn't give any flaws or opportunities to take advantage of. Luo Nan's defense was impenetrable in this confrontation of pure structural laws. Unless Ghost Eye was willing to give up his skin and ruthlessly deal a killing blow, he would be able to wipe out nearly 1,500 Xia City ability users in one fell swoop. President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu would really knock Ghost Eye to the bottom of the sea. Luo Nan was still pacing back and forth on the podium. The circular conference room was still silent and quiet. Only the floating shisha muslin in the air could be heard. Some areas had disintegrated, and this was the final result of Ghost Eye's first wave of attack. He Yueyin had already finished dealing with the eliminated students by now. She walked back to the podium and locked gazes with Luo Nan. Luo Nan smiled at her. Speaking of which, the abyss region is quite close to us. He Yueyin was already used to Luo Nan's train of thought that casually jumped out from the heavens. She didn't respond. Her gaze swept over Luo Nan's body, then she looked at the surrounding area. Are you alright? I'm fine. Really? I'm telling the truth. Luo Nan's attitude was indeed very honest. His current physical and mental state were pretty good. He was able to experience the attack methods of an extraordinary while pondering over problems. This in itself was a kind of enjoyment. It would be even better if there was someone to exchange a few words with him. Luo Nan saw that He Yueyin's tightly locked brows had yet to loosen, and he even consoled her. It's really nothing. It looks like we're separated by a piece of paper, but the standard of that paper isn't thickness. It's dimensionality. Speaking of which, things like conceptual nouns are easy to misinterpret. It's hard to say who might be misled. He Yueyin went, yeah. She confirmed with Ouyang Chen during this time, and she received a relatively positive response. Only then did her brows relax a bit. It's best if you stay focused. It's fine. After all, Ghost Eye is testing my work, not me. Luo Nan finally found someone he could communicate with. He didn't want to let go for a time. He slowly strolled to the side of the lectern. He propped himself up with one hand and assumed a more comfortable posture. He complained in a chatty manner. Who in the world came up with the name, 3 levels, 1 district, 1 domain? At first glance, it looks like a very deep region. The road is long and dangerous, but it's not the case at all if you truly experience it. Let's not talk about the 3 levels. Don't you think that the Abyss region is too close? The current Abyss region was indeed too close to Luo Nan. It was just as he had said before. Under the powerful impact of Ghost Eye, the distance between the Abyss region and the real world had been compressed to the point that there was only the distance of a piece of paper left. Fortunately, it wasn't thickness. It was dimensionality. Ordinary people would be completely unaware of this, or they would feel as if they were separated by a natural moat. But in the hands of extraordinaries, it was like a piece of thin paper that could be broken through at any time. Walking in the real world was like standing at the edge of a high-temperature furnace, accompanied by destructive power. If Ghost Eye was a bit closer, or if he just flipped the gambling table and killed Luo Nan should have been able to break through this barrier. At that time, the terrifying energy turbulence of the Abyss region would be amplified by a special structure. It would sweep over. Whether it was Luo Nan or the 1,400 people in the circular conference room, they would all be turned to ashes. This was the ability of a mental type extraordinaire. Luo Nan would not deny this point. But was all of this charity from Ghost Eye? Luo Nan didn't think so. It was like he and Ghost Eye were playing chess. Blades flashed and swords flashed on the chessboard, and the players on both sides were quite polite and amiable. Ghost Eye didn't go for the kill, and Luo Nan didn't use his full strength. On the gambling level, Ghost Eye was unable to probe the limits of Luo Nan and the ring of blood intent under Luo Nan's control. Under the pressure of the destructive power that could break through at any time, the force field of the ring of blood intent still stood stably. After the initial destructive power swept through the sprout relied on its sufficiently thick and solid roots to achieve equilibrium with the new destructive environment of the Abyss region. It continued to extract the pure energy within. Though the rate of growth had shrunk by a large margin, it was able to achieve a new stable increase under the new environment. He Yueyin had a rough idea of Luo Nan's current situation, which was why she allowed him to be willful. But for the sake of safety, He Yueyin still walked 2 steps forward. She maintained a distance from Luo Nan so that she could rescue him at any time. She was like a professional secretary. Her hands drooped down and overlapped on her lower abdomen. She chatted with her boss in a soft voice. After all, we're in a confrontation right now. It's very hard to probe under normal circumstances. Luo Nan recalled for a moment. He could only admit that this was indeed the case. But then again, for an ability user who can probe into the Abyss region, is there really such a big difference between what's normal and what's special? A certain person and his secretary chatted enthusiastically. But from the very beginning, there was no beginning or end to the description. There was a true attitude of treating no one else present. This made the onlookers on the internet unable to stand it. Hey, we're still here. Pretentious bastard, go shit. He really jumped into the Abyss region, but I don't understand a single word. I've had enough. Is there anyone who understands? Didn't they just say 60 seconds and 15 seconds? Has it started yet? Has it passed yet? Host, guest, there's no one who can decipher it. Wake up. It's not time to sleep yet. No matter how the group of people yelled, the reality was that the key members of Zhang Ji's broadcast room and the reading physiognomy program team had already become deep participants in this gambling game. They were situated in the most central region of the gambling game. They no longer had the heart to do anything else, even if that was their job. Chapter 575. Motherfucker, what are you all looking at me for? Ari, the only paid guest of Zhang Ji's live broadcast, really wanted to stay out of this matter. However, the continuous changes in the situation had already caused him to subtly separate from his peers, making him even more eye-catching. As the only live broadcast guest who could interact with the spectators in real time, he didn't even have the time to rejoice that he had escaped a fatal gamble. He had unavoidably become the target of the focus fire. God, Ari, can you explain? This was a rather polite question. Hey, it's not good to take money and be in a daze, right? This was a rather harsh question. Mr. Honey Pot Mommy's boy, what else can you do besides spitting trash talk? If you have the money to raise a little Pekingese, you should at least be loud enough. This was a vendetta. When Re accepted the position of guest, he never thought that he would end up being cut apart by the host, the other guests, and even the guests of the other programs. The déjà vu of a little transparent creature hiding in a corner and barking suddenly became very intense. He really wanted to say something that would shock everyone. He wanted to insult Luo Nan once more. However, the current conversation on the rostrum in the round conference room was something that only those powerful individuals who were able to fight in the abyss could personally experience in his cognitive system. Of course, he could explain, but wouldn't that be the same as licking Luo Nan's stinky feet? Then he really wouldn't release a little Pekingese. Bah! Right at this moment, a clanging sound suddenly rang out from his room. As a B-rank psychic, Re didn't need to turn his head to know that it was the sound of the curtains that weren't closed properly. The passing hurricane had blown them up, knocking over the furnishings in the living room. Zhangji was located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was surrounded on all sides by the sea, so there was a lot of rain. After the Third World War, the global climate changed, and a few other factors made this situation more common and more intense. Re could have ignored it, but he just happened to need a reason to buffer himself from the awkward situation on the internet. Cough. It's raining heavily outside. I'm going to close the window. As he spoke, he forced himself to ignore the comments in the live broadcast room and the forum. He got up and left the range of the camera. After leaving the area, Re immediately felt his body relax. The cold sweat that he forcibly held back just now poured out. But the problem was, what about after closing the window? What should he do next? Was there a power outage? Before he could think of a way to get out of this predicament, his sensitive mind already knew that the man with the spray bottle was up to something again in the round conference room shown by the live broadcast. Probably because he had been oppressed by the energy turbulence in the abyss and felt a little uncomfortable, that guy played a new trick. He used the condensation ring formed by the thousands of participants he hypnotized to infiltrate the conference room and even outside the Shangding building. Alright, this wasn't some sort of trick, but rather an extremely exquisite operation. It was similar to replacing a peach tree with a peach tree, but it was also like defending against an enemy outside of the country. The impact of Ghost Eye's crushing force was transferred to the thin veil of water mist. There was an additional buffer zone, and there was also too much space for subsequent operations. Re was in the living room, staring blankly at the curtains that were fluttering in the wind. She was not in the mood to clean up the messy living room. In fact, this kind of thing was naturally handled by the AI butler. It was not up to him. His body was idle, but his mind was in a mess. Re was also a grade B expert and had a good teacher. Her cultivation and knowledge were not ordinary. Of course, she knew that this move of Luo Nan's looked simple and clear logically, but in reality, it was very difficult. When she was in a good state, she was also able to stay and cultivate in the abyss. But when it came to actual combat, it was already quite good to be able to hold on for 60 seconds of eruption. And in these 60 seconds, she could only go straight against Ghost Eye. It was impossible to be like Luo Nan, to be in a deadlock with Ghost Eye, or even to create changes during this time. This move of Luo Nan's already involved the effective use of the environment in the abyss. According to Gong Chi's words, this could not be done without the power of a domain. Domain? Re was more and more afraid to return to the live broadcast room. There was only one thought left in her absent-minded mind: what else can Luo Nan do? What else can I do? Luo Nan also had this question in his heart. The game with Ghost Eye in the Abyss concerned the outcome of the bet, but it was not within the scope of his concern. In fact, whether it was the standard verification of 60 seconds or 15 seconds, he had already passed long ago. The reason why the two sides were still confronting each other in the Abyss wasn't because Ghost Eye was thick-skinned. It was because Luo Nan was shameless. As mentioned before, it was really rare to have such a high-level, capable, and proper sparring partner. Ever since Ghost Eye's long-range attack across space, various magical abilities and methods were equivalent to the basic attack patterns of extraordinaries in the Abyss. One by one, they appeared before Luo Nan's eyes. The truth was quite consistent with Luo Nan's expectations. Luo Nan was no longer a rookie who had just stepped into the inner world. Even though it had been less than 3 months at most, the high-level battles he had experienced during this time had already surpassed the sum total of many ability users in their entire lives. The logic world of Frost River reality, the planar crossbow of Ku Wang's communication, and the direct assassination of Jin Tong in the Outer Sea. There were as many as 3 confrontations that extraordinaries had directly participated in. In particular, he himself was sinking deeper and deeper. Whether active or passive, he had accumulated a wealth of precious experience. He had a clear reference. In addition, he could see the entire picture of the Abyss and the polar regions. He could also see the rules of the twisting curtains. He could see not only the scenery, but also the skill. Several reasons were stacked together. When Ghost Eye made his move, Luo Nan immediately found a reference in his memories. He sorted out the corresponding rules and verified the thoughts in his heart. Sure enough, whether it was President Ouyang's logic world, Luo Yuan's planar crossbow, or Ghost Eye's long-range attack, they were all essentially the same. They all used special formats to interfere with special environments to form special scenes. The only difference was the degree of completion. The logic world had the highest degree of completion. Its laws were strict. The planar crossbow's interference power was extremely strong. It was the most lethal. As for Ghost Eye, he was the most casual in comparison. He had more or less stripped away the material plane of the energy transportation environment. He had only set up a basic structure in the Abyss, but he had fully utilized the particularity of the Abyss to make his attack simpler and more direct. Well, the Abyss was a place that could not be ignored in the end. Right now, it seemed that the 3rd floor was no more than a prison. Though the polar regions were good, they were still a bit too far from the real plane. Only the Abyss, this wondrous dimension, could accomplish many things. It gave Luo Nan Tua Nu, perhaps it should be said that it made up for the part that was lacking in his system. His soul cloak and his deep sea scene seemed to fit into the special environment and special power of the Abyss to achieve twice the result with half the effort. I really want to give it a try. Then let's give it a try. As a researcher, Luo Nan was very clear on how important inspiration was. He had Ghost Eye as a test subject with enough weight and restraint. Ah, no, an experimental partner. How rare was that? How could he let Ghost Eye leave under these circumstances? Ghost Eye, that old bastard, was quite generous. He really did accompany Luo Nan to play along. Of course, Luo Nan's confrontation with Ghost Eye was mostly just for absorption. Even moving the mist muslin was just a small test. The current Xia city was absolutely not a good place to truly verify the soul cloak and the deep sea scene. To verify Luo Nan's most fundamental self-format. A total of 5 extraordinaries were paying attention to Luo Nan. They were paying attention to the blood wool bracelet. They were paying attention to the gathering of thousands of people. They were paying attention to the towering fortress that slowly set sail under the cover of the night. Every detail of the changes inside and outside of the fortress was brought under a magnifying glass for analysis. Not a single detail could be hidden from people. Needless to say, Luo Nan's cobweb altar was inextricably linked to this fortress. Every second that the fortress existed in the Abyss brought a wondrous force to the cobweb altar. Even if the human-faced arachnid was hidden deep in the polar region and could effectively avoid the fortress, Luo Nan would still need to draw a few more times to verify the fortress in this environment, no matter how big his heart was. The Xia City region was not a place for experimentation no matter what. Luo Nan could only shift his thoughts outwards. In any case, the range of his soul cloak had already expanded by several thousand kilometers in the past week. He could not do it in Xia City, but he could do it in the boundless wastelands and the ocean. Luo Nan would not let go of this learning and verification process. He slowly exhaled. His mind underwent the arrangement of the overall planning technique, cleverly dividing it into two sets of staggered mission sequences. One was in Xia City, absorbing nourishment like a thirst. The other was in the distant Pacific Ocean, learning and practicing on the spot. He was a beginner. There were successes and failures, but his capital was robust. His train of thought was correct. Luo Nan could afford to wait. He could afford to play. He could afford to train. He could afford to do several rounds of verification. Even though his mental exhaustion was quite large, he still gradually brought out the rules and regulations. He had not spoken for several minutes already. The tens of thousands of spectators, including He Yuan at his side, all thought that he was doing his best to fight Ghost Eye in the abyss. They were completely unaware that half of his energy had already been divided 7,000 kilometers away. He was tossing and turning in the Pacific Ocean where mutants wreaked havoc. Luo Nan could not avoid adapting to this marvelous method of use while he was verifying and practicing. Unlike the monotonous cloud world where reality and illusion were indistinguishable, Luo Nan's consciousness wandered the earth. The first thing he sensed was a natural scene that was much more colorful. Other things aside, he sensed the state of light and darkness in different time zones at the same time. He was presented with an inconceivable macroscopic perspective. In this moment, it was as if he was stroking the soft and bumpy surface of the ocean and the earth. He was swimming freely within the uneven thickness of the clouds. He was feeling the high-speed rotation of the planet within the void of the universe. It was under the touch of such a marvelous scene that Luo Nan's sense of space had a marvelous distortion. A subtle change occurred in his observation of the real world. Luo Nan didn't know when it happened, but he suddenly felt a bit absent-minded. An inexplicable thought was born, and it quickly magnified. Where am I? What kind of perspective am I using to observe this world, this planet, this universe? When doubts were about to fill his entire train of thought, the seed of an answer that had long been buried deep in his heart broke out from the ground. 3 long lines shot out together. They pierced through the boundless, penetrated the dim and bright, and penetrated the existent and the non-existent. They constructed a classical Cartesian coordinate system, locking Luo Nan himself at the origin. He was at a loss. He was cold. He was here, but he had nowhere to rely on. It was as if he was isolated from the world. From Luo Nan's perspective, the answer was not surprising. It was merely a single me. Aside from this, all thoughts and distractions were discarded. They were discarded like worn-out shoes. And it was precisely after he clarified this fundamental principle that a marvelous curve suddenly appeared in the world within Luo Nan's eyes. Chapter 576. The mess in the living room had already been cleaned up by the AI butler, but Yi was unwilling to return to the live camera no matter what. Even if the live broadcast platform wanted to argue with him about the contract and ask him for compensation, he would accept it. Just as he made up his mind, a communication wave penetrated through the wind and rain and came in. The one contacting him was the young man that his teacher, Gong Qi, had been nurturing for the past few years, Yuan Fei. This person was very lively and reliable. However, Yi didn't like him for no reason. At most, it was because the same sex repels each other. Yuan Fei had a smooth sailing life under Gong Qi's guidance in the past few years. It was only when he messed up his business in Xia City that he came back dejectedly. Yi was happy for a few minutes because of this. Now that he thought about it, maybe he should give Luo Nan a drumstick first. That would make things more balanced. It was fine not thinking about Luo Nan, but thinking about that person made his mood sour. For a moment, Yi wanted to refuse the call with the reason that he was doing a live broadcast. But when he thought about how his every move could be said to be the center of attention, he couldn't hide the fact that he had temporarily left the table, so he could only answer the call with a toothache expression and said indifferently, "Hello. Senior brother Luo, I wanted to contact you but I was worried that you were doing a live broadcast." Re's toothache intensified. "What the hell are you staring at me for? Are you trying to snitch on me in the future?" And such a hypocritical and respectful form of address. Who knows what the other side is like? No matter what, it was unlikely that Yuan Fei would open a video call with Re to verify the degree of respect behind the form of address. Of course, Re would do the same. The two of them pretended to communicate using traditional communication methods. Senior brother Luo, headquarters just held a joint conference. The president, the vice presidents, and the secretaries all participated. But the teacher is still absent. Re furrowed his brows. Calling him teacher so intimately, have you confirmed your relationship? You haven't even offered him tea. Aren't you ashamed to talk about it? Re was in a bad mood and was in no mood to respond. He said coldly, the teacher is in seclusion. Of course he doesn't have time. Which extraordinary ranked almighty did not take months to comprehend absolute arts. He has to leave seclusion after a meeting. What can he do in the end? But this involves Xia City's latest stance. I heard that someone has already proposed to ease the relationship with Xia City. A joint development or something. Once that happens, it will be difficult to make changes. Teacher, Re's chest tightened when she heard that. The photo of Jean Tong's headband was still going viral on the internet. Could the people from headquarters stop their greed for money? Even if you want money, you need to be alive to spend it, right? Looking at it from another perspective, the reason why a bunch of old fogies with their necks buried in the soil were working so hard was most likely because they wanted to extend their life with money to spend a little longer. A breakthrough cultivation theory did indeed have the opportunity to achieve this. That was what he thought, but he would never agree with Yuan Fei's words. He immediately put on the airs of a senior brother and scolded, "You've been working in the association for a long time, and you even have a position. Why are you spreading rumors? What does the association want to do? What does the teacher want to do? Do we need you to report it? You should learn from me and go into seclusion for a few more days. Cultivating and comprehending is the right thing to do." It felt much better to have someone to vent his anger on. No matter how scheming and shrewd Yuan Fei was, he couldn't calm down for a while after being forcefully rebutted by Re. He stiffly replied, "Senior brother, I'm busy with a live broadcast. I won't disturb you any longer." Then he hung up. The relationship between the two sides would most likely be frozen for a period of time. Re didn't really care. He had his family backing him. His starting point, achievements, and background, including his relationship with his teacher, Gong Qi, and their mutual interests, all of them crushed Yuan Fei. Yuan Fei only had a slight advantage in age and a bit of potential that hadn't been realized yet. If they really clashed, Yuan Fei wouldn't amount to shit. But some people had some words that only disturbed people's hearts. Yuan Fei's reminder caused Re's train of thought to deviate a bit. He vaguely knew why his teacher had to go into seclusion. Some time ago, he had been ordered to hire professionals to search for the location of Snake Tongue's true body. It seemed that his teacher had set up a trap on Snake Tongue's missing soul body. He could retrieve the face he lost in Xia City. However, Snake Tongue was cunning and intelligent. She was also cautious and cautious. She had hidden her true body extremely well. He hadn't completed his task. He was originally worried that he would be reprimanded, but he didn't expect that there would be no follow-up. It seemed that Gong Qi had really gone into seclusion. He hadn't replied for a month. He had even gone to the point of fasting. Only the nourishment cabin responsible for maintaining his life was still operating. Re was actually a bit worried. After all, Gong Qi had turned his seclusion, which was supposed to be a cover, into a real one. He had turned important matters that involved his face and personal interests into a fake one. It was quite inconsistent with his usual meticulous planning to the point of being cruel and ruthless. He felt that he had encountered some unexpected situation. So Ree had bitten off more than he could chew when it came to the matters of Dripping Sword and Sprinkler Man. He had even continued to expand his influence. He wanted to probe the situation over at Xia City. The entire inner world knew of his relationship with Gong Qi. If his teacher were to suffer a great loss over there, the other side's response, especially a response from someone like Gao Tianshi, would most likely give some clues. The problem was that Xia City's response had been normal from the beginning until now. Everyone was tearing at each other, shooting their mouths at each other, greeting each other's parents and relatives. They were also mindful of their bottom lines. They wouldn't truly provoke trouble on the level of extraordinaries. Everything was far too normal. In addition, Gong Qi's near-invincible extraordinariness had brought about far too much inertia. It was to the extent that Ree had gradually forgotten his original intentions. He had sunk deep into his favorite profession of shooting his mouth off and spitting his mouth until now. A person's thoughts were always strung together. The previously forgotten links were only temporarily buried by the dust and sand of emotions. Now Luo Nan had shaken the world with his heaven-bestowed talent and grandeur. He had taken out the picture of the golden copper headband and other stimulating information to show how extraordinary he was. He had contended with Ghost Eye in the Abyss region. He was calm and unruffled, skillful and at ease. These circumstances, which he had never thought of before, were strung together and suddenly raised the world. Of course, this included Ree's own assessment of Luo Nan's status and ability. Some plots that he would never have thought of before were picked up one after another by the thoughts that blew away the dust and sand. They were like an iron chain that coldly stretched across the front, reminding Ree of its existence. Motherf ****. Could it be that teacher really was tripped by a horse-tripping rope? Ree still didn't think of the worst-case scenario. After all, the data from the life support system wouldn't lie. But he couldn't help but shiver in his heart when he thought of Gong Qi gnashing his teeth in frustration and helplessness. Oh, he was thinking too much, right? What if he wasn't? Ree couldn't stay any longer. If it really was a horse-tripping rope situation, then Gong Qi's suffering a great loss was secondary. His closed-door training caused him to be cut off from information and then hit the wall again. The consequences were truly unbearable. Gong Qi couldn't bear it. He and his family couldn't bear it either. The more he thought about it, the more he felt uncomfortable. Ree subconsciously reached out his hand and touched the emergency communication device he carried with him. According to Gong Qi, if there really was an urgent matter, he could use this communication device to wake him up from his special state and get in touch with him. It wasn't that Ree had never done this before, but he couldn't find a reason to do so. Now that Jin Tong was killed, the cage theory was born, and even the Abyss district wasn't stable. All of this came from that damned Luo Nan. This should be an urgent matter. In the end, Ree stomped his feet and practically closed his eyes as he walked to the study. He didn't dare to look at the discussions online anymore. He turned off the live broadcast and rushed out of the room like he was fleeing. He went straight out the door, started the car, and drove towards the secret location of Gong Qi's closed-door training. Emergency communication could be done over a long distance, but some words and some things were better said face-to-face. This was a matter of attitude. It was 4 or 5 in the morning in Chan City right now. Due to the hurricane passing through, it was raining cats and dogs. It could be said that one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Ree wasn't in the mood to play the midnight car game. He went straight into autopilot mode. The headlights tore through the darkness on the road as he advanced at high speed along the magnetic track. But this way, the 10 or 20 minutes on the road would be very hard to endure. Did he want to listen to some boring news like Guala rapidly upgraded to a Category 3 hurricane? Suspected to be influenced by factors other than meteorological conditions? So even though Ree screamed madly in his heart, "I don't want to see it," his fingers still opened up the audio and video system honestly. He connected to the live broadcast platform and watched the latest news from the circular conference room in Xia City. Of course, the bullet screen and whatnot were all blocked. Then Re saw Luo Nan on the podium. His eyes were half closed, and his eyelids were slightly trembling. This scene wasn't much different from before. It was just that he was a bit more focused. But it was strange. The instant Re cast his gaze on the podium, Luo Nan also opened his eyes. His gaze was focused on the camera. It was more like he was aiming at Re's eyes. Re's heart thumped. An inexplicable cold current gushed out along with the blood pumped out from his heart. It soaked half of his chest in a cold and soaked sensation. There was also a prickling sensation of being ground by coarse sand. What's going on? Has his fear of Luo Nan reached this level? The car speeding through the wind and rain wasn't affected by Re's mood. It continued to drive strictly according to the established route. The AI butler followed its preset priorities and played the information that was currently most worthy of its owner's attention. It just so happened that it was news related to Hurricane Guala. The relevant situation was updated. Guala is predicted to make landfall on the west coast of Nadu Island in 20 minutes. The maximum wind speed at the center is currently 197 km per hour. The giant waves in the early stages are likely to bring along a Class C surge. A portion of the marine mutants will attack Nadu, Pala, Newark, and other coastal defensive lines. We can't rule out the possibility of a Class B or higher mutant appearing in the wind zone. Re fiercely knocked on the steering wheel. He was a bit irritated. His route just so happened to be within the range of influence of the surge tide. If his luck was bad, he would encounter a few mutants that came ashore. That would truly be disgusting. However, listening to the unfinished meaning of the news, it seemed that the upgrade of Hurricane Guala this time was caused by the influence of a powerful mutant within the wind zone. A powerful vicious beast that could temporarily affect extreme weather hadn't appeared in the surrounding seas for a long time. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.